Good evening, and hello. I hope you're all ready and prepared, because what I'm going to share with you this evening is nothing less than the depth of our fear, the darkness within us, the crimes of the unexpected. The shadows in our sleep, they hold us still. Are you paralyzed? Or is it their hand pushing you back? Do you know? Can you fight the struggle? Does it make your hair stand on end? Do you know how to fight back at all against the shadow of fear? Is that in your nature? Or do you stare at the shadow as it grins back at you, red eyes blaring, beady, tiny eyes you can see in the dark? Do you fight, or do you find yourself paralyzed by sleep? Do you know the difference? Can you get your hands to wiggle? Are your legs stuck down as you stare at the tall, lanky, dark spirit at the edge of your bed, towering above you? Do you know its name? Does it know you? Has it projected into your space from another realm? Yes, Genevieve. It knows you well. Because each night it creeps into your dreams. It's clawing at your window, tap, tap, tapping under your bed. It is that which you feared as a child, that darkness, that shadow. Good evening, olive sky. I hope you're ready. I hope you brought the flashlight. I notice we're all here in the dark tonight, sharing a story about the shadows, the unexpected crimes of those we love, and the things that go bump and give us fright in the dark at night. Tonight's lore brought to you by the age-old question of the shadow person. I'm going to explore with you my own experiences tonight, and then we will talk at length. I'm open to hearing your stories of the unknown, your stories of the ghosts, your stories of being held at bay in your own bed, somewhere in between waking state and dream. Because I think we've all been there, staring up at the grinning, foul darkness that we know is there, reaching out to us. And we can't fight. All we do is struggle. This may be called sleep paralysis. But frankly, friends, I think we all know what it is. It's that clawed, long, unseeable hand of fear beckoning us closer. And with that, you know what time it is. What do you see in the dark? Does a wide grin scare you? Do you keep a knife nearby? Googly-eyed Nancy Pelosi. Well, heck, have you seen Grandma? She's something else here. Bring Grandma on up. She'll get you. There she is. Hold on. Let me, if you're not having a bad trip already, Grandma will laugh at you a little bit. There she is. Yeah. Anyhow. What is it about the darkness? The shadows that we've talked about, the Native Americans share these stories. It's embedded in our psyche that there is a tall, lanky figure in the corner of our room, maybe hanging from the ceiling, maybe just beyond the corner, outside of our eyesight. Who are they? What do they want? And how long have they been in our space? This is what we will explore to start with. And then the darkness begins. Hello, I'm AronMSound, and this is the show known as Lookup, the remix, where I tend to interject myself into a conversation that nobody asked me to be a part of, and by way of which I take it somewhere nobody expected it to go. Tonight, I take us in a little different direction by way of our producer, Lita Caproni. Lita Caproni! Who has made me dedicate the month of October to the most appropriate of ideas. Spooky, scary, bump in the night, stories of the macabre, stories that prey on the worst in us so that we can free them for the rest of the year. It's a good catharsis, I believe. And so tonight I'm going to start with the shadows I know and the experiences I've had and the stories that we know about the shadow people. It's an interesting, well, genre of specter, let's say. Do we know if they're ghosts? It's what lurks beyond the lights, true. How do we know what's beyond what we can see and perceive? This is one of the most base factors in humanity and our general disposition when it comes to how we focused in what we see and what we do not see, whether or not we see the color we see. Our brains early on decided that there were some things in the dark that were too scary to ever allow us to see. So we, in general, cut out that zone. What's there? Well, I think you and I both know. When we're laying in our bed, there's a moment somewhere in between sleep and the waking state, often called sleep paralysis. And it's in that moment, not unlike catching something out of the corner of your eye, that you might see them. The they. Now, Doctor Who called them the Silence, a tall alien species who's been here since before us, who feeds off our fears, who sits above us and can wipe our memory of their existence. They can wipe our memory of existence. Not of our own, but of theirs. Think about that for a second. If there is a creature that lives amongst us that we could see, but we would forget the moment we did see them, we'd never know they were here. And they could stand at the end of our bed, reach over us, and feed on all of the worst inside of us. How much and how often do they feed? What is their true agenda? And how long have they been alongside our beds? Well, this is a lore that sounds and looks a lot like ghosts and specters and ghouls. But in particular, it is universal across the planet. And yes, it sounds like a succubus. It sounds like something that feeds off of you. Now, in the case of the shadow people, we find them everywhere, in all societies, in all cultures, throughout history. They've been drawn and painted. We've seen them time and time again in stories. We heard and seen permutations of them in The Slender Man, the shadow man in the forest who actually has a pale skin tone. But it comes from those things in the corner, specifically the tall man with the tall hat. Have you seen him? Has he reached out to you from the corner? Slowly and gracefully clawed hand out to you, reaching, hoping that you will extend your hand back to him as his grimace wide grin unfolds and unfurls across his slender face that is only seen by the little bit of light from the moon cascading across his rigid cheek. Yeah. Energy vampires, true, seeking out our fear, somewhere in between here and there, when we're heading towards that dream state, which, by the way, I've come to find is no different, as far as the brain is concerned, to our waking state. The only difference is that our physiological responses are turned off. Otherwise, the brain experiences and sees and feels exactly as it would when you're awake. So what is the difference then? Is that thing we see there, the tall, slender shape in the corner, grimacing at us, eyes blazing red, too close together. We can see it in the dark, yet we know it to be shadow. Songwag, welcome back. So good to see you. Are you ready for ghost stories and darkness and shadows and tales of mothers gone crazy? Because tonight, this is exactly what we're doing. Amongst that, the illusions of the eye. Or are they illusions? Do you know? Do you expect me to know? Are you hoping that it's all just a story? Or do you recognize that each one of us has our own? Which is what brings me to my first tale tonight, truly. Happy early Halloween, Song Wang. Yes, indeed. So about 6 years ago now, I had come off the road after touring for almost 30 years at that point in time. And I decided it would be cool to find myself a place to settle into long term, like a theater. And after a very long period of searching out something that I thought would be right, I finally got an offer to take over production at a very old theater with 1,500 seats in the middle of Los Angeles on Wilshire Boulevard. Oh, look at me, I'm looking like Travolta over here. Excuse me. Pardon me. Nobody needs almost partial man nip slip. That's not scary. It is scary, but it's not the kind of scary we're looking for. So, with this great long-term future gig in hand, I rolled up to this ancient building. I took the gig. My predecessor had been there for 4 decades, during which time he had built up a stockpile of everything and anything theater-wise, whether it be extra tools and leftover projects and refuge in the corner and props from old plays and pieces of sets and unfinished everything. Dust as far as the eye could see. Ancient lighting fixtures from the 1920s and 30s were found in dark corners and crevices. Many, many hours were spent by many people in teams cleaning out that building. Now, it wasn't just the 1,500-seat theater. There was also 75,000 square feet of 3 floors with event spaces in them. And 100 years or more of events and organizations going on in that building. Now, if you're not familiar with the background of the theater or the ideas that go along with it or any of the, stories that are pervasive in the lore of theater, the beliefs, then you might not know that theater people, well, let's just say that we are always concerned about doing the right thing when it comes to the ghosts and the spirits of the space. And when you clean a theater, you suddenly give space to those who inhabit this theater, the stage, the audience, when you leave. And I'll say that once again. And yes, Genevieve, residual energy that feeds the demons that torments the souls of the resting, yet offer no gifts of peace and grace. They linger in the edge of night, waiting for the crumbs fallen from the lost. Rest peacefully with oil in your lamps, and with trimmed wicks be rebuking anything unholy that casts shadows across your souls. Well said. Yes. In the theater, there's a proud tradition taking care of the ghosts, the specters, the spirits left over in the audience. And many roles are often hanging around after they've completed their journey. Why? Well, it can be argued for many reasons. Sometimes the obvious. Somebody passes away in the space, either tragically or unexpectedly, or they've been there so long that they just never leave. Sometimes it's just a reflection of a moment, an extreme feeling that was imprinted so boldly on that space that it never, ever leaves. And so it becomes part of that building, or stage, or theater, or audience, or a chair, or a prop. In the theater, it is an old rule that when you leave at night, after cleaning up and sweeping the stage, and closing the theater doors, and making sure the chairs are all set up, the doors are locked, the trash has been taken out. You go to the center stage, and you turn on, if you haven't already dragged it out there, what's called the ghost light. Now, this ghost light, those who don't believe may tell you that it's there for safety so you don't fall in the dark. But that's not why it's there. It is one of the oldest practices in the theater. It is there to satiate those specters and ghouls and ghosts and actors and performers and stage managers and audience members and ushers who have long since left us or left an impression. Thank you, Genevieve, for being here at all. I appreciate you. So when you leave the building, it is the belief of those of us who run the theater that a show goes on without you. What show, you may not know, and you may not ever catch those who put it on. But when you do, you are given a view into another side, another realm, another place, another time. Sometimes into a moment so special that you can only see it out of the corner of your eye. Welcome back. You have returned. Hi, Song Wang. In this case, the first experience I had was of those around me telling the stories of the things I might likely experience. And the first specific story that I was told was about the usher in the theater. This usher had made itself known to almost everybody. And I was told to expect to experience something firsthand. Which, by the way, I did, but not as directly as I'd always kind of expected or hoped. In the case of the usher, though, the story I was told was about another usher, an older gentleman who'd been working at the theater for many years, closing up the doors and ending the night cleaning the room. And essentially, he was alone in the theater on the second floor in the balcony. And he had done his walkthrough and checked in to make sure nobody was in the bathrooms. And so he was turning off the lights. And he might have even had the trash in his hand. And he heard someone walk up behind him. And before he got a chance to turn, he felt someone's hand on his shoulder, which made him stop because there was no one on that floor with him. And he knew that there may have been one or two other people in the building, but they weren't anywhere near him, which made him turn around, and there was no one there. Now that's the first story I heard. And of course I said, okay, well, wow. Okay, well, wow. I didn't know what to believe, or whether it was believable at all. So, I went about my business, cleaning up the theater, hiring new people, reorganizing. And about 2 weeks in, I'm walking out of the theater, just setting the alarm. And I had been, at that moment in time, parking on the street next to the theater and not in the parking lot, behind the theater, which made it so I had to walk out into the foyer, make a left turn, and walk down a long hallway and pass by an adjoining hallway like this. So there's a long adjoining hallway before I walk out in this direction through a pair of doors. Just set the alarm. Lights are off, except for the hallway and foyer lights, which are always left on. I walk out. I'm heading to the door. I happen to look down to my left in the hallway, which is when I saw the first and only time in my life so far, for my own experience with my own eyes, a full floating apparition. And she was amazing. She was like smoke. She came up and out of nowhere. She formed like a cloud. And she had a scarf that she tossed around her neck that she looked at me. She realized I was looking at her. And I'm gonna turn. She went like this. And looked at me and kind of shook her head and turned and went forward and disappeared into the wall. Right into a picture, a huge picture of an orchestra playing. Which made me, of course, the next day, well, first off, I freaked out. Stun locked. Absolutely, totally stunned at what I had just seen. I walked out of the building. One of my colleagues was outside. I was giving them a ride to the bus stop. And they saw the look on my face. They said, "What happened?" I said, I think I just saw a full floater." "What?" "I think I just saw a ghost." And she said, "What did you see?" And I described the situation that I just did to you. And she said, the hairs on the back of her arm stood up. Well, that was the first time I ever had a direct interaction, eye to eye, where I was recognized, and I recognized it. It wouldn't be the last, though, there, as many things happened. Genevieve says that she sees things, but she has learned how to control what she sees. For a while, she thought that she was schizophrenic, and later learned that it was a gift. Lorraine Warren was a friend. Wow, really? That's really cool. Yeah, it is often misunderstood. And I would argue that some of the greatest gifts are unseen and held by people that would otherwise be thought to be insane or wild people or, lost. And I think some of us know they can just see a little further or more, a little extra. So, full floating apparition now in 2 weeks into my gig. I, of course, am telling this story for the next couple weeks, until such a time that I'm closing down the theater again, and this time there's somebody there with me, assisting closing down, and they're up on the second floor in the balcony. I asked them to turn the lights off, bring the trash down, make sure the doors are closed, seats are up. They did that. They came down. And as they were walking down the aisle in the downstairs area, I saw the lights on the second floor turn on. Up in the foyer, second floor foyer walkway, like the hallway behind the actual seats. Because you could see the entryways from stage where I was standing. And I said, did you turn the lights off? This person said, yeah, I just did. I said, they're on right now. This person said, what? Came up on stage, turned around. I just turned the lights off. And as she said that, the doorway in the theater, which were automatic door closers that only went 3/4 of the way, so they wouldn't slam or make any noise when they closed. So an usher had to close it, and you had to push hard. The door that she didn't close behind her, it shut. And I said, "We have just experienced the usher." And she said, "I don't know if I want to be on schedule again." Such is life in the theater. This is not the last time I experienced something in the building. And come to think of it, I spent a lot of time talking to that room to try to make sure that the others would always appreciate what I was trying to do. Now, in the course of cleaning, we started to clean out the crow's nest, the lighting booth, a little room that also acted as a projectionist room up at the top of the theater in the back of the room, in the back of the audience. And this is one of these places where ancient lighting fixtures have been dumped in the corner. And there were things scrawled in the wall. And there were literally 2 things called strikers in there. And those strikers are the predecessors to modern day spotlights. They are essentially an explosive that makes a light. Because you have a gas striker at the bottom, it's a gas tube that flows up into a canister. And there's a large piece of flint inside that canister. And in order to get that flint to light behind the lens, you have to fill the canister and then strike the gas so that the big piece of flint lights up and goes whoosh. Highly dangerous job back in the day to be a spotlight person. And there were 2 of them up in that booth. Who knows what kind of dangerous things were going on, because the ventilation wasn't that great. Well, against one wall were the notes, still there, from the 2 people that ran those spotlights. One had 490 some odd hours, and the other had just over 500. So they clearly worked very closely together the whole time. And those scrawls were in pencil from the 1920s on. 2 gentlemen working closely together. So it was always our guess that when we saw a face up in that window from stage, a see-through face with a beard, looking crazily through the window after we had cleared every single piece, every single historic item out of that room, we assumed that it was one of the 2 spotlight operators. And we tested one of the 2 names to see which one would get a reaction or response. And once we got a response, we kept that name. And that's why we ended up calling the spotlight guy Saul. It's befitting, too. Saul was clearly a stage manager, because that spirit would flit about adjusting things. And sometimes if you had set a light, you had to make sure that thing was wrenched down, because Saul would come in and just turn it during shows sometimes. Like, he didn't like where you put it, he was going to put it somewhere else. And if you were on stage, it was reported many times by many performers that they could see somebody staring at them through the window that wasn't up in the booth, because it wasn't used unless we had spotlights or projection. So it wasn't really some place you could see someone. So it would really freak actors out, because of course there's also lights in your face. So if you can see the person in the back, there's something weird going on. And harmless as that spirit was, it was one of the most witnessed of them all. There's definitely a shift in our realm that science will never be able to explain, Genevieve says. Her boyfriend's mom wants to go on a ghost hunt with her. She's 75. I don't know if she wants to expose her to that realm at her age. She already thinks I'm crazy. Well, there are, my mom's jumping out of airplanes with her 94-year-old boyfriend, so nothing surprises me now, by the way. She gets spooked, it's her fault. Lena with the real take. Rough. That's real though. That's real. So, with Saul in the lighting booth and the usher in the foyer, and who I could only guess would be an actress or performer, hanging out in the walkways, backstage. Who else could be there? Wow, lots. After a short period of time, I put up some security cameras because there weren't any in the theater at that time. In and around in spaces that I needed to be able to see that were blind spots from the point of stage that my office was. And for kicks, I thought it'd be funny to put up what I called the theater ghost cam, which was just basically a channel on Twitch that ran overnight, and it was a cheap way to have other people do security for the theater because you'd get notifications if anybody saw anything. And it didn't take long before people started clipping ghost images, videos, unexplained happenings. And my favorite of them all, my favorite, is somebody we called the Critic. And the Critic is by far one of the funniest ghosts of all time, because I don't know if it was actually a ghost. I do believe that this, as I'm looking for, I do believe it is a case of when somebody has an experience and they're embedded in the space, and maybe they've had repeated experiences or they've been there a long time. Maybe you'll leave a little of yourself there. And in his case, I saw video after video, clip after clip, of a semi-transparent, smoke-like figure sitting in the audience, stretching, looking around, putting his arms behind his head, leaning over, leaning his head back. It was very clear that whatever and whoever this was, they were very uncomfortable and didn't want to be there and had no interest in whatever it is they were watching. And they came up in many different seats and many different times. And the Critic himself seemed to be stuck. So whomever that was watching a show they were really not interested any longer. And then there's the one that I would catch, normally late at night when nobody was there except for one or two of us, as I'm turning off the lights. And the only way to catch her was by seeing her out of the corner of your eye. I called her the lady who was late. Now, it would take being somewhere on stage, and you'd have to turn your head, and you could only see her in the peripheral. You could never look at her directly, she'd just disappear. But what you'd see is a lady in classic Jackie O dress with a pill hat, taking off her hat and carrying her little pocketbook and coming in late from the rear left door of the theater outside of the aisle and running to a seat in the third or fourth row and going in about 3 seats and sitting. And the moment she'd sit, that's when the loop would start again. And she would come in through the back door again. And if you just stood there, once you saw her, you just stood there and kind of looked forward and looked, aware of the periphery, you could see her loop over and over and over again as if she was stuck on a tiny VHS tape. What would cause that? How would that happen? Why would that happen? Why are there so many spirits here? Why are there so many things making noise? Why are we catching the critic so many nights on the camera? Well, I was starting to think that maybe there was something more to the whole experience and the building itself. And I had to do some exploratory work, meaning I had to look in places that nobody had been in the building for who knows how long. And that included little tiny tunnels underneath the seats and stairs and the stage. Now, these tunnels were meant, back in the day, to carry acoustically the orchestra and also the cooling and heating all at the same time. But they were designed so that low end would be carried further and that the audio from the orchestra could actually be heard in and through every seat. It was fascinating design, and I had to look at the blueprints of the building to get an idea of what I needed to do, where I needed to go. And the reason I did that is because I had to run cabling underneath the seating and stage, as well as make sure there was nothing down there that was forgotten about. Genevieve says, people think that graveyards are haunted, but they're really not. The spirits that some people actually see are from an event that happened on the land where the graveyards are. True. The imprints seem to come in all different nature for all different reasons, and some of it may be just some science. Like how, in the case of the building and the theater that I was in, there seemed to be a lot of copper inside a lot of concrete. An immense amount of Faraday cage around the building. And something like that could very well keep RF transmission from leaving, just bouncing around inside. Small magnetic or static charge just stuck. Now, there is no loss of energy anywhere, but you can definitely leave behind trail. And Genevieve, Lita says that she doesn't think she's ever had any paranormal experiences. You haven't been hanging out with the right people, Lita. Clearly. Anyway. What do I know? I experienced this with Civil War battlefields, Genevieve says. So, I had a task, which was to drag a whole bunch of cables several hundred feet from one end of the theater underneath the seats to the other. And I'd been down underneath a little bit, but on this particular excursion, I went true spelunking. I was going to see the edges of the tunnels and follow all the trails and see if some of these things that were little bits of mystery were still there, or if they'd been closed up. Specifically, a connection to a building across the street that seemed to have a tunnel connected to ours. Excuse me. Now, when I entered the space, in general, my working environment was pleasant. People were kind. The environment was lighthearted. And I really never felt any negative vibes. I was having a good time. It was honeymoon phase, but after being down in the tunnels for almost an hour and a half, with a long rope attached to me and an assistant in a place where I could call them in case something happened or I got stuck. After I returned to my assistant not being outside where they were supposed to be, which was curious. Took the rope off me, went upstairs, found my assistant in the lobby, talking with one of the cleaners. My manager, the manager of the theater, seemed bothered with me, which was unusual. I had just started. There was no reason for it. And I had been asked previously by the actual CEO to come visit him when I was done spelunking, to hear about what I had seen. And when I went to the office, they seemed not to remember. There was many curious features of returning from the tunnels. And I couldn't shake the feeling that something drastic had changed. Now, I have come to a strange conclusion about those tunnels. That sometimes when we transfer from one place to another, we don't always know that we're doing it. We don't always know that we're going through those spaces. We don't always know that we're there in a portal. We don't know that the veil has been broken. And we only find out because of the minute adjustments that happen after passing through. After those adjustments become clear. Well, I came out of that tunnel system. More worse for the wear, I'll tell you this. Because it seemed as though the world had been turned just slightly on its axis. No longer did I have the full support of everybody around me for some reason. People were not quite as kind. I received passive-aggressive emails from a colleague that had otherwise sent me glowing and, well, if, in business terms, sweet emails. Actually, they were excited about working with me. But the timbre of the world that I came back to changed just a little. Now I have come to believe that that space I wandered through was the focal point or the lens of whatever that building was, where all of this energy was collecting and redistributing, being funneled through. I had no idea what I was crawling through. And I may not know now, because I can only guess. I can only hypothesize that I traveled through a vortex built by architects and designed to amass energy to invigorate the space. But these powers are clearly dangerous, and if you do not mark the path, someone may accidentally wander through them without knowing until later, when they see the effects that no one else can tell have occurred. Well, I'm thankful that I am who I am, that I have the awareness that I do, because I did notice these adjustments, and over time, I've learned how to wrench myself a little bit backwards towards that original place. Thankful that the information out there can help when it comes to particle physics and the metaphysics side and the transcendental side. The science is much clearer than it ever has been. Now, when I returned, despite the, well, less than stellar and awesome experiences I started to have, I get nauseous, Genevieve says, when certain energies are present. That day at the Lost Sea made you deathly ill. You were in and out of consciousness for a few days and got scared and paid a visit to a local shaman. Wow. Oh, I'd love to hear about that. That sounds amazing. So, that experience led to a number of other experiences alone in the building and or with others. Specifically, cleaning out a room in the basement, I heard children laughing down the hallway, clear as a bell. It sounded like they were just around the corner, but I knew for a fact it was myself and just some cleaners upstairs. In the entirety of the building, there were definitely no children present that day. On another occasion, my colleague was closing up the larger portion of the venue, the ballrooms, and came over to me. Now, this person is a skeptic, not a believer, but they came over to me pale-faced and said, "Aaron, there's a dog in the building, right? Somebody has a dog?" I said, "No." He said, what do you mean, no? I said, "No. Nobody's got a dog." He said, "Well, there's somebody else in the building, right? With the dog?" I said, "Well, I don't believe so. I think we're the only ones in the building." And I went and looked at the checkout on the security pad, and nope, we're the only ones in the building. He said, "Well, I think there's a dog in the building." I said, "Dude, I don't think there's a dog in the building." He said, "Well, I just turned the lights off in the other room, in the ballroom, and when I walked across the ballroom back to the theater, a dog was walking next to me and panting the whole time." Now, I have to lend credence to what he was saying because he walked across a wooden floor, a wooden dance floor that had some give and bounce to it. So if there was a dog walking next to him, you'd hear the tip, tap, 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 tip, tap. And he was in full darkness. So he wouldn't have been able to see the dog, just the dim light from down the hallway and the exit signs. Which is why he asked me if there was a dog in the building. And I had to tell him, no, there's no dog. So I said, "So you just heard a ghost dog, huh?" He said, I don't know what I heard." Ghost dog. Who knew? Another time. Yeah, it wasn't a dog. It wasn't a dog. Who knows what it was? Another time. There was 5 of us in the building doing a promotional photo shoot for the building itself. There was some lighting people, a photographer, an assistant, myself. And we had closed up the building, locked all the doors. But the doors have been open all day long because there were workmen coming in and out of the building, working on air conditioning, actually. Now, it was said that whatever happened occurred while the doors were open during the day. But I reviewed the videotapes of the security cameras, both inside and outside. And I can assure you that what we experienced and what we saw that evening did not come in through the doorway at any point during the day, and is not present on any of the video cameras at any point during the day until we found what we found. Several of us were in the large ballroom setting up lighting. We had been in and around the building designing shots, talking about planning, and the sun had just gone down, or was in the process of doing so. I had maybe an hour before, as everybody else left the building, closed up the doors and locked everything. So we knew we were the only ones in the space. Now, that said, once we were in the ballrooms, I left several doors open in the main stairways and over to the theater, so made easier access. and inadvertently made it so it was easier to hear if anything else happened in the building, because the building did carry audio pretty well if those stairway doors were open, because the stairways were central to the building. Well, at some point, we're in the ballroom, and we all heard a lot of noise coming out of what sounded to be close to the central elevator. It sounded like smashing and screaming, and we knew that we were the only ones in the building. So we all alerted. Somebody grabbed a pole. I went and grabbed my baseball bat, which happened to be backstage. Yeah, it's something you carry backstage, just in case, you know. Anyhow, we all prepared ourselves and started heading down the stairway. A couple people headed around the other direction, just in case. So there was 2 different directions. So we all met downstairs, not seeing anything else. We heard grunting from a room just beyond where we were standing. Now, in that room was a large mechanical device that was there to pump AC to the rest of the building. And on the side of it were the controls for the heating. We were in another room. Now, in that space was another anteroom, this tiny little space. Maybe a 10 by 10 room at the most. And that was an empty space that had been used for some storage. And we heard grunting coming from there. And then a growl and a scream. And we all alerted and got ready. And I pulled out a flashlight from my pocket, flashed it in the room. And what we saw still shocks me and sends shivers down my spine to this day. We saw a young man wrapped in black, with dirt all over his face, as if he had had coal on his hands and he had smeared it on his face. You couldn't really see his eyes, and he was cowering in the room, and he was grunting at us and growling and yelping and screaming as soon as he got found. And he ran around the room as if he was a rat trying to escape. And then he ran towards us, which made us all lift whatever we had in our hands. We surrounded him. When we surrounded him, he reached out with his hands that were... It looked like he crawled through the dirt. His whole body was covered in dirt. Or blackness, coal. I don't know what I saw on him. He was very pale. And he looked like he was naked underneath the material, the black material that he was wrapped in. Now, I only came to realize after a time later, that the material he was wrapped in was something we called duvetine, that this person must have found nearby, because we had a large roll of it under the stage, so that person had made it elsewhere in the theater. But this is the problem. The doors were closed as soon as the last person left. And I could not find this person on any video entering the building. We asked, "What are you doing here? What's going on?" And they could not answer. They growled, they gurgled, they scratched at us, and pulled the black material around them. We could tell that they were naked. Where had they come from? There were no clothes found later. How did they get naked in this building? Down in the basement. Why were they wild and feral? Why was he covered in dirt and what looked to be coal dust? His eyes were wild. And the best way to describe it is growling. We made him walk up the stairway, which he kept his back up the stairway as he walked up, as if he was cornered and he didn't want to take his eyes off us. We got him up to the doorway at the back of the stairway, otherwise known as the elephant door, which he backed up to like an animal caged and cornered. We asked him again, "Who are you? What are you doing here? How did you get in here?" He just said, "Ah! Ah!" Whether he was trying to scare us or whether he actually could not communicate, I will never know. Because one of my colleagues opened the door alongside him so that the elephant door would slide open. In that moment, he turned and bolted out the door. We followed him down the alleyway behind the theater, and we watched him as he ran to the corner and turned around and yelled at us. But he didn't say anything. It was just garbled. And when he turned around and walked away, we saw him at the corner walk in the most unusual way, as if his legs were not normal. He was ambling side to side to side, not as if there was something broken, but as if his legs moved in a different fashion. We all talked about this for some time. We sat there in the alleyway, pondering what we had just experienced. I almost forgot to call my manager to let him know what happened. He asked me if I had called the police, and at that point there was no reason to, so he said, "Don't worry, we'll call in the morning." Now, we came to find that when we went downstairs, this person had damaged all the lighting in the room, as if they didn't want the lights on, because they'd smashed all of the lights downstairs. No damage was done to anything else. I could not find a roll of duvetine with pieces missing out of it, or tears. And by the way, you need something to cut duvetine. It's not easy to just shred or pull. I have come to believe that whomever or whatever we experienced that night came from the building and not from the outside. Because once again, they were not on any video entering the building, but they are on video leaving. And there were no clothes found anywhere in the building without their owner. What have you seen? What has made your skin crawl? Have you ever been too scared to breathe? Have you ever cowered in the corner or flipped the lights on as fast as you could because you sensed that something else was there? Yes, Lita. was a boiler room worker. He died from a coal flash, didn't he? I will never know, Genevieve, but that would be something that did exist in the building. A boiler room that had a formerly coal stove. Yeah, he was alive. Yeah, very much. 5'8", skinny, pale. I wouldn't be. I mean, his hair looked maybe like very greased down blonde, but like I couldn't tell because he was so disgustingly dirty and covered in muck and like black dirt. No, I did not. None of us did. In fact, we kept him at bay. He kept trying to scratch at us. And he literally said no words. I get chills thinking about him because, once again, I challenged I almost got in trouble because somebody got in the building. But I challenged my bosses to find him coming into the building. They ended up assuming that he was some AC worker on drugs or something, but the AC company was like, no. In the absence of evidence, folks will look to anyone to point blame. And despite the obviousness of how wild the experience was, because much of it was caught on camera inside the building, including us herding him to the door, him scratching at us, his yowls and screeches, the garbled non-words, and then him running away down the alleyway, including running across the street. It's all on video. They could not explain where he came from, except to say, well, it must have come through when the AC. You guys got to be careful about leaving the doors open. Despite the fact that I'd done a sweep through the entire building when everybody left. Despite the fact that I'd locked all the doors. Despite the fact that we had walked the whole building as a group, making plans after everyone left, and the building was silent. Where he came from, we will never know. Where he went to, I can only imagine. And that's my story of the man who came from nowhere. And that really did happen. The last little thing that I can share with you from that venue was a very wonderful, awe-inspiring experience that I used to love to bring people to so that they could have a little paranormal experience that was guaranteed. Because all of the others were pretty much up to the entity or spirit at hand. And trust, there was some darkness in that building. That ebbing feeling that someone is following you too closely when you're alone in a dark space, in a hallway that is not frequented by anyone, maybe a dressing room or a third floor or the storage closet. Like someone's behind you, watching you, lonely, wishing that you could communicate with them. This was not the experience in the end. I would bring people into the large ballroom, a ballroom that millions likely have danced in, had weddings in, bar mitzvahs, quinceañeras, you name it. Every joyful occasion, birthdays, Kiwanis clubs, everything happened in that room. So something deep was imprinted there, if not joy. And all you had to do is walk into the room and sit on the stage. It had a small bandstand stage, old school style. Not huge, maybe 20 feet depth by 20 foot width. Just enough to get a small band on, 3.5, 4 feet high. And you could sit on that stage in the dark. Come to join and tell the stories? He's looking, are you gonna, no? Yes? We don't know. All right. You could sit on that stage in the dark with no one else in the building. Just sit there with someone and hear the shuffle and clamor of hundreds of feet on the wood as they danced in the dark to some unseen song played who knows when, all imprinted on the room. The shuffle of happiness, of joy, of shared moments. The sounds of tiny scratches and taps in an empty room. The sounds of people that may not even exist anymore. All caught in a building like a Kodak picture. Now, when my time was done there, I made sure to step on the center stage, despite the fact that it was bittersweet to leave. It was time for me to go. It wasn't really the space for me, despite what I had thought initially. And that can happen in life, by the way. The spirits there had actually treated me incredibly well, very graciously, so kindly that I will always remember each and every moment that I had, because there's lots more, but they're little things. Moments when you know that somebody's there with you to support you, and that they're there because they can see what you're doing, and that you love and have passion for that thing. So when I got to step off the stage there, I made sure to turn and look around the room and wave at the unseen, because just in case, I'm going to take a brief break, and when we come back, I'm going to bring this story of the unthinkable, and the producer will likely have taken over my chair. I'm going to tell you the story of the 2009 Taconic Bridge State Parkway crash. Specifically, the story of Diane Schuler. You might know the story as Something's Wrong with Aunt Diane. Because the spirits and the ghosts and the ghouls and the monsters in the dark, they don't always come in the unseen, but rather sometimes they come from those we love the most. Who are they? Sometimes they're our mother.
Did you see it? Okay, so I'm gonna put my cursor over it and then I'll exit the screen and see if I can go in a bit more. But I don't have the technology, I don't have, you know, Aaron, I don't have the kind of setup that you have to be able to really, really zoom in to this thing. Watch again, because there's movement here and there's movement here, this area, and there's movement here. But this is it, here, coming out of the cloud. Watch again. You see? That opened up. That opened up. It's moving. It's moving. Look at this thing go. Just before it goes off screen, you can see this burst out of this part, the top end of the cursor, out of that section there, just before it goes off screen. Watch. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna slow it down some more. Talk it down to 0.05. So the moment it's popped out there, I'm gonna just rewind it 5 seconds. It's out, it's moving. There it goes. What the fuck is that? Excuse my language, but yeah. What the fuck is that? Let's take it back. So, you're gonna see it. This split open. There's a section here where it splits open and it pops out, and then it's gonna dance and do its thing. Watch. It's moving. It's gonna pop out here through the other cloud. It's gone again. Up. Up. Remember, I've slowed it down. Off the screen. So it went out of camera. see it?
Hey, what's happening, folks? AronMSound here at the Nickelburger. Is that correct? I have
Nickelburger.
At the hotel. I'm sorry. I know it's terrible. This is G. G is a bartender here at the Nickelburger. I had the pleasure of meeting him, and say hi to the folks out there at home.
Hello with my gimp hand.
Yeah, and the gimp hand is actually kind of the focus of our questioning today. And as most of you at home know, that I don't actually normally do a Q&A, but this is a rare moment. Tell us how you got that, actually, G.
About a little less than a month ago, I was hit by a car coming from work, but I was coming from another place. And yeah, so I was just propelled 6 meters, which would be 20 feet in English.
Yeah.
So I was on one side of the street and ended up on the other side of the street in the crosswalk, flying through the air. And landed on my head.
Wow. And when the ambulance came, what kind of condition were you in?
I was, I mean, how I am now, like you see me bartending and hey, that's how I was. I mean, I didn't know that I was unconscious for 10 minutes. And then when I came to, I had no idea why everyone was reacting to me the way I was, but my head was split open here, down to the skull, and I split my ear open, contusion here, bruises under my chin from the handlebars. And it was actually an accident. It wasn't like I did anything wrong or the driver did anything wrong, because I didn't have reflectors on the back tire, wasn't wearing a helmet, which nobody in Europe wears helmets. Which no, my friends say I have to wear a helmet because they don't want to lose me. And
which, by the way, at least you got a fancy selection of helmets over here. I've seen some.
It's true.
It's really
these
dope.
really cool ones that are just frames, and you can have hats put on them. They're really, it's amazing.
I hadn't heard about that shit at all.
Yeah, it's a really great design concept. So you basically buy the frame, and the hat fits over it, so you can get a ball cap, a horse riding cap. I'm gonna get a fedora.
Hell yeah, that's pretty sweet.
Because everyone doesn't want to look like a geek when they're wearing a helmet on their bicycle.
You got a huge
I used to make fun of people. I was like,
on
oh, he has to wear a helmet because he gets an accident.
Well, you know.
But no, it was just random. But the thing that was really that plagued me is because I didn't remember the accident at all, because my back tire got tapped. So something in your body just, you check out and you go flying, and I don't know, something flying through the air or something, and just, I checked out. But I had this overwhelming sense of happiness, or what I remembered, that in my mind it started to rain, and that's how I justified the accident, because obviously if it was raining, he didn't see me and I didn't see him. And I Facebooked about that and told people, you know, that at least if I had died, because I didn't remember anything for 10 minutes, I was unconscious. That the last thinking was that I was completely happy with my life, and I've had a great life. But then a friend of mine emailed me and didn't know about my accident, said that I had a walk-in leave my body, and I had been struck by lightning when I was 7. And I also, I didn't even...
yeah, you told me about this. Now we got to go back now. When you had been struck by lightning when you're 7. Describe that situation. How did that go down?
Well, this is why I hate fishing now. I used to love fishing. But we were fishing in Florida, and it was my parents and the new we were fishing on this pier, and in Florida these piers go out for a mile. I don't know if you've been to Miami or to Florida, so they have these long piers. It's the same in Virginia. And then they have these kind of bulkhead kind of things, so there's long piers, and it's where you could fish, and you're kind of way out in the ocean, so to speak, at least not a mile, but pretty far out. And they always have these signs, if you see inclement weather, get inside because lightning will strike the pier. And so my mom was a big fisher person, this newlywed girl was a big fishing person, and my dad, and they were like, okay, we're gonna pack up the gear. And I had this fishing net that you wrap up in a can, and it started to rain, and the lightning struck the pier, and just at the moment that the lightning struck the pier, she was taking the can from me. And my mom's version was that she was a patient, and my version was that she saved my life. But the lightning went through my feet, through my hands, through the can, into her, and it actually, she died from And so my friend's email, and I kind of lived with that for a long time, thinking that I also had you don't know this, but my brother passed away shortly before that too.
Man, I'm sorry.
And yeah, and he was little. I mean, I was the older brother, but so you couple that, and then someone basically either through impatience or sacrificing their life for your life as a kid, and she had a 2-year-old daughter, which we knew. She died basically. And so when my friend emailed me, and she didn't know about my accident, that I had what she called a walk-in, and that something left my body and you feel different. And it just resonated with me because it really bothered me that I couldn't remember the accident. But at the same time, the last memory I had before the accident was happiness and raining. And then when I talked to my partner about this, because it was really bothering me, and he was kind of a little bit not happy that I just went right back to work. I mean, I had stitches like this up here at the bar, and I had my arm wrapped up, and they just put a cast on it because it was actually broken. They thought it was spring. I had stitches in my ear and big mark here, and I was like, hey, bartending, yeah, that's fine. And I'm at my day job doing marketing and stuff, and they're like, and I'm sure they're looking like, what the fuck is he doing here? You know, you should be home sleeping. But then it took a couple of weeks, and then I just said, you know, it's weird to me that the last thought I had before the accident, I was really happy. Why would I be thinking about my life? I'm living. I'm always kind of actually a happy person. I'm very fortunate. And I said, I think maybe in that 10 minutes that I was unconscious, lying on the ground, maybe it wasn't raining when I got hit by the car. It was that because I woke up, I actually was physically soaked. I was completely drenched by the rain. But it was actually, and then I said, I think I died. And then he just nodded his head, and then I just completely had a release at that moment. I was like, fuck, I died. And he said, that's why they kept you in the hospital for so long. They were waiting for you to have a stroke, or for your brain to swell, and all this.
And how long were you in the hospital?
Almost 4 days.
Wow.
But I mean, once I was up. They came in like 6 hours later and said, you're not allowed to get out of bed, you're not allowed to do this, and the guy next to me, and I had my best Deutsche course ever, because I was in a German hospital, so German's kind of much better since the hospital. And also when I came out on the ground, I was speaking German, which was weird, because you would think I would speak English first, but I knew that I was in German.
No,
It's
the audience doesn't know. Where are you from originally? Actually?
I'm from New York, or
Okay.
from the States.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm actually from California.
And how long have you been out here?
2.5 years.
Wow.
So yeah, struggling.
So you came out of
unconsciousness and speaking German, but they spoke to me in German first, so of course I would speak to them in German. Yeah, and I got a cold in the hospital.
Oh
That's
wow.
it.
But what were you saying about your bruises though?
Oh, that was the thing that was really interesting to the doctors, is that within a day, I had been hit by the handlebars on my throat here. They were gone within 24 hours. I'm sorry. I had a huge contusion here. My jaw was the size of a grapefruit. I'm sorry, within 2 days, it was gone. I just had this like rug burn on my face. The stitches within a week, they took out. You can't even see where my ear was split open. I just have a piece missing here inside.
Wow.
A chunk of my ear. And now I have a really cool scar from hitting the pavement. But
Wow.
they were really amazed at how fast I healed. And that I didn't have a seizure, my brain didn't swell, I didn't have an aneurysm, and they were waiting for days for me to have this, and it never happened. And I have to say, when my friends emailed, the reason it was so impactful for me is that it wasn't that I had this overwhelming sense of happiness before the accident, it was that this overwhelming sense of happiness is what brought me out of this state. This is also when I was struck by lightning, I left my body. It was because my mom was already lost my brother, and this is why I had said to my mom, I came back because I couldn't have her suffering losing two sons. But this bookend period of 25 years, let's say, this is like now my time, so to speak. And my friend even in her email said, you've really worked hard in your life. You've done so many amazing things, but you always work really hard at it. And now it's going to get easier because whatever needed to be processed at that time is done.
Wow.
And now it's your time.
So you think that near-death experience, or that partial death experience, was the bookend?
Yeah, in a way, because I dealt with this before one time when I was 20, because I thought, why me? You know, I saw the movie Fearless, and I was in my 20s, and it just took me right back to the experience of being struck by lightning. Why did I survive and this person die? And I felt that I cheated death, you know, and I had a brother that passed away a few years before that. Not that I was meant to die and he wasn't, you know, it's like if death is following you and you keep cheating death.
Yeah, now, when you say you keep cheating death, you have another experience with death,
when I
right?
was 17 also, I had something where I got stabbed by a seafood knife and got ketone poisoning and slipped into a coma and came out of that as well. And I mean, I'm 42 now, and as an actor, I was in television playing teenagers for a living until I was 31, and I'm still not looking my age even.
Yeah, not at all. Not at all.
Yeah, I mean, even in the hospital, they didn't know how old I was. They thought I was a kid.
So do you think this is part genetic luck of having resilience, or do you think this is part of something?
My 33-year-old brother looks older than I do, and I think I've always. We were talking about this at the bar with Cameron. It's like you really make a choice to do what it is that you really want to do and be where you want to be when you want to be, and that really does make a difference in your life. I'm exactly where I envision myself. I envision myself living in Europe, and I needed to do this. And I don't necessarily have a desire to live in the States, but I know it's part of who I am. And I think over the next 3 years, you know, I will be back on television again, but I will have had myself. But I needed to leave.
Well, it's a fantastic story, man. And I really appreciate you sharing.
No, it's my pleasure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's really awesome, man. I mean,
Yeah.
it's inspiring, and I know it's going to inspire other people for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's still weird. Because, I mean, that's what really creeped out. Part of it is that they, I guess, told him that I died. But, of course...
Well, and you know the Germans, I mean, the Germans are pretty serious about that shit.
Yeah. and he was joking, he said, well, you know, he's not going to tell you that he's an alien, so... Because they were really, I mean, I think they were looking for metal. I mean, they asked me if I had metal.
Really?
Yeah. I was asked all these questions. Do you have any metal in your head? Blah, blah, blah.
Because of the way that you survived the crash.
Yeah. And then even the cops were like, well, he's talking, so obviously he's okay, and he's making jokes, and he's really funny. German police officers laugh. I was also like fucking with him a little bit with the breathalyzer. I was going, I didn't want to do it.
That's amazing, man. Dude, thank you, G.
Thank you.
No problem. What's your whole name, just so I can make sure? G.
My
Baudet.
Native American name is Great Eagle.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, nice to meet you, G. Great Eagle Baudet.
Yeah.
Peace. I think superheroes. What about you? Anyway, subscribe up there, right down there. Stick around, folks. I'm going back to Amsterdam tomorrow, so hope you're having a great day. Thank you, G. Baudet, for your incredible story.
Some breaking news from the Deconic Parkway. A two-car crash has shut down the southbound lane there. Jim Smith in Chopper 2 over the scene. Jim?
Hey, Chris, that's right. We are over the area just south of Route 134 in Ossining. Just moments ago, the vehicles involved were removed from the scene. There were two vehicles involved in an accident. There was then a fire. Both cars were completely engulfed in flames. At this point, we are aware that there were some injuries. The exact number and extent of those injuries is not known at this time. Again, this is just south of Route 134 in Ossining. The northbound side of the highway has only one lane open with about a half-mile delay into the area. It's the southbound side where we're seeing heavier delays. Delays at one point were over a mile getting to the accident scene, and with the vehicles just being removed, a second lane has been reopened on the southbound side.
What would you do if the closest person to you had all your children in their car and they were not responding, what would you do if that same person whom you'd seen just earlier that day, who was totally acting and behaving normally, was suddenly erratic, and one of your loved ones received a call from them, seemingly confused, saying they couldn't see, confusing their brother for their husband. Now, what if all of your children were in the vehicle with that person who was confused, unable to see, and seemingly erratic? What would you do? Do you call the police? Do you call your family members? What does this look like when someone you trust's behavior becomes more than unusual, but quite and completely unexpected? What do you do?
Rolling! Background!
Law and Order has always drawn from real-life tragedy to create storyline.
The crash, and we're also learning about a civil suit being filed today. ABC's Andrea Canning has the story.
In the moments surrounding the fatal crash, friends and family frantically tried to locate Diane Schuler.
I have a family here that thinks that they might have a medical emergency of their sister. There's 3 kids in the car. 5. They're trying to locate her.
It's been 3 months since Diane Schuler drove the wrong way down this New York highway, killing herself and 7 others, devastating 3 families. These 911 calls reveal close friends of the family trying desperately to trace the minivan's whereabouts. From them, we learn that some of Schuler's nieces in the car initially made cell phone contact with their parents.
The girls just called in distress. They said that the aunt is driving very erratically. We think she's sick, and we're trying to locate the kids.
Little did they know.
The year is 2009. Shortly after 1:30 p.m., on Taconic State Parkway in the town of Mount Pleasant, near the village of Briarcliff Manor, one of the secure secret spaces in New York. 36-year-old Diane Schuler traveled 1.7 miles in the wrong direction on the parkway and collided with an oncoming SUV. There were 3 people in the SUV. Schuler and her children, her daughter and 3 nieces, and 3 of the passengers in the oncoming SUV were all killed. This was the worst accident to happen on that highway since 1934. So it was inevitable to make news. But one could never expect or know the story that would unfold to explain why a mother of 3, an aunt of 3, or more, would do such a heinous thing. What would cause a person to run the wrong way on a highway and take so many with them? What we're about to explore is dark, so a trigger warning. It's not for the faint of heart, and I don't do this because I want to glorify it or glamorize something or anything but to shine light on how the darkness in us can take root in unexpected ways. That we should care and be careful that the darkest spirits among us, the real shadows, don't get missed. That we care in the moment. We ask the right questions, we probe in the right ways, so that we don't miss the signs, the shadows taking over our loved ones. The investigation into the crash was viewed by the nation, and the media gave it tons of attention. Toxicology tests revealed a slew of issues, including extreme intoxication, both alcohol and marijuana. Unfortunately, Diane Schuler's husband initially denies that she used any drugs at all, or that she drank at all. And then he says she didn't drink excessively. And then he says she smoked weed, but not normally. And DNA tests were later obtained that confirmed the original results. That she was indeed intoxicated with the children in the car, despite the fact that nobody around her seemed to know that she actually used anything at all. About 9:30 a.m. on Sunday, July 26, 2009, Diane Schuler left the campground at Hunter Lake, a place where she would have been with her husband, a regular. So much so that afterwards, one of the people interviewed was the camp caretaker, and they specifically said that Diane did not seem intoxicated when she left, that she seemed fine and in good spirits. She was driving a red 2003 Ford Windstar that she had borrowed from her brother, and in the minivan she took with her 5-year-old son, her 2-year-old daughter, her brother's 3 daughters, so her 3 nieces, age 8, 7, and 5. Her husband, Daniel, also left the campground at the same time. He left in a different vehicle, in a pickup truck. He took the family dog with him. Schuler later stopped at McDonald's. The kids got to play at the play space. And then later on, she stopped at a Sunoco, a gas station. And she asked for a specific pain medication, Aleve, and they didn't have it. So she left. Now, once again, the clerk also said that she did not seem to be intoxicated. Diane left there at about 11 a.m. She traveled along Route 17, Interstate 86, over to the New York Thruway. Sorry, I'm reading my notes, by the way. And it was just about at what they call the Ramapo-Sloatsburg service area. She was crossing the Tappan Zee Bridge, heading east. There was a bunch of witnesses who said they saw her in that red minivan driving aggressively down the way. She was honking her horn, flashing headlights, tailgating. She was swerving in and out of lanes. At some point, Schuler calls Warren Hance, her brother and father of the 3 nieces in the back of the car. She told him that they were being delayed by traffic at the same time that she was swerving in and out of it. According to the police, She was witnessed at 11:45 p.m. on her hands and knees, looking sick on the side of the road. Likely vomiting, they said. She was seen there for some time and then seen again in that same position at a restaurant just up the way.
An important lesson here for all of us about being extra careful on the road. A horrible car crash yesterday killed 8 people, including 4 little girls. It happened just north of New York City. A minivan went the wrong way on a parkway and smashed into an SUV. CBS News correspondent Terrell Brown has the story.
It left even veteran first responders shaken.
I'm not familiar of any other crashes that reached the magnitude of this tragic accident in recent memory.
Sunday afternoon, a Long Island family in a minivan drove the wrong way in the northbound lanes of a freeway just north of New York City. That van crashed head-on into an SUV, killing the 3 men inside. The minivan was filled with children, a mother carrying her son, daughter, and 3 nieces. The crash sent the minivan rolling down an embankment, ejecting several of the children, and finally, after coming to rest, the van burst into flames.
When firefighters arrived, that van was still on fire. Crews worked to save as many passengers as they could, managing to pull 1 child out alive.
That child was a little boy, the mother's son. Everyone else in the minivan was killed. Terrell Brown, CBS News, New York.
What do you do when you can't reach the person who has your children in their car? When you last spoke to them, they were not themselves.
In 2009, one of the most devastating auto accidents in New York State history occurred on the Tacoma State Parkway. Diane Schuler had just left the campground she'd been vacationing at with her family and was heading back to her home.
This is from the channel Killer Bites.
It was a drive she'd made dozens of times before.
Dark stories.
But 4 hours later, she would be spotted driving full speed down the highway in the wrong direction. It was a tragedy of unmatched capacity with multiple lives lost, and the question still remains over a decade later. What was wrong with Aunt Diane? On the afternoon of July 26, 2009, Warren Hance saw he had an incoming call from his 36-year-old sister, Diane Schuler. Diane had taken his 3 daughters along with her own family on a camping trip, and that morning they were scheduled to drive back home. When he answered, he was surprised when he didn't hear his sister's voice on the other end. Instead, the voice belonged to his 8-year-old daughter, Emma, who sounded panicked. Emma worriedly explained to her dad that Aunt Diane was having trouble seeing while driving, and she wasn't speaking clearly. Eventually, Diane got on the phone and said she was feeling disoriented and had foggy vision. Warren could hear his sister slurring and immediately knew something was wrong. He told Diane to pull over and stay off the road, and that he would drive out to her and help them. But
when you talk
Welcome to my scientifically informed insider
love,
look at mental health topics. If you find this video to be interesting or helpful,
and you know
please like
they
it and subscribe to my
well,
channel.
how do you speak to them?
Today's question asks if I can analyze the
caring
mental
for
health and
themselves in
personality
the
factors that
situation?
may be at work in the Diane Schuler case. Schuler was responsible for the 2009 Tacoma State Parkway crash that killed 8 people. Just a reminder, I'm not diagnosing anybody in this video, only speculating about what could be happening in a situation like this. So first I'll take a look at the background. This section's fairly brief, then the timeline of the crime, then the mental health and personality characteristics. So starting with the background, there's not really a lot of information about Diane's background. She was 36 at the time of the accident. She was married. She had a 5-year-old son and a 2-year-old daughter. She worked full-time in accounting and made about $100,000 per year.
So for all intents and purposes, Diane seems to have a good life. The kind of life that most people wish to have. And in fact, she's reported to have seemingly been the perfect kind of mom. She'd be there at the PTA meetings. She had kids that were dressed to the nines at all times. And she herself presented as someone who could handle anything. So the question becomes, what exactly happened? And why?
Her husband worked as some sort of security guard. He had one previous DUI. Friends and relatives reported Diane was dominant, controlling, strong-willed, productive, and secretive. In the HBO documentary that covered this case, there are some references made to Diane's mom leaving home when she was young, which sort of left Diane feeling responsible to take care of her brothers. Diane smoked cannabis nearly every night, but as far as alcohol, family members denied that she had a problem. So moving to the timeline of the crime. The collision occurred on July 26, 2009. It was a Sunday. That weekend, Diane and several family members were at a campground in Parksville, New York. At about 9:30 a.m., Diane departed from the campground, ostensibly headed back to her home.
The chilling moments before a wrong-way driver kills 3 people on I-17, all caught by 911 tapes. It happened last Friday, and it was one of 3 deadly wrong-way crashes.
The witnesses are many. Many people saw along the way this happening and had concern for Diane, not knowing who she was, and the children they could see in the car. I have to warn you that much of what you're going to hear is disturbing. These are first-hand accounts of what people saw in the moment on the day of. Viewer discretion is advised.
In just a week. ABC 15's Sarah Goldenberg joins us now live. And Sarah, a lot of witnesses called 911 trying to help.
Steve, almost 30 people got on the phone when they saw that 911 driver barreling toward them on the I-17. There were several near misses until their worst fears happened. That driver slammed right into a minivan carrying a family. Before it ended like this, the 911 calls flooded in.
PPS 911, what's your emergency?
Dozens of drivers narrowly escaping head-on collisions.
There's a car going the wrong way on I-17 here.
Someone was headed the wrong way. They almost hit me head-on. There's like nobody on the road, thank God.
He almost hit a couple of cars. I swerved over, but he almost nailed a couple of cars behind.
My apologies. That's something else I'm looking at. Same roadway.
3 months after a horrific wrong-way crash that left 8 people dead on a Westchester County, New York highway, the family of driver Diane Schuler is continuing to defend her. Toxicology reports show Schuler was drunk and high on marijuana when she drove the wrong way on the Taconic State Parkway and slammed into another vehicle. A private investigator hired by the Schuler family says the findings are a mystery.
We have interviewed countless people who've known her from high school to present. No one has ever seen this woman drunk.
Schuler was killed in the crash, along with her 2-year-old daughter and her 3 nieces. The 3 men in the vehicle she hit also died. Moments before the crash, one of the girls called her father to say something was wrong with her aunt. It was a message relayed to 911.
They're at a rest center. The best they can understand is that they were in Tarrytown or Sleepy Hollow. Those were the signs that they saw. The aunt isn't picking up the cell phone right now.
There's something wrong with Aunt Diane. She's not feeling good. She's having trouble seeing. She's having trouble talking. And we're lost, Daddy.
Those are the words of a 9-year-old niece in the back of the car trying to call out to her father, Hans. Now, after that phone call, Hans tried to call back, and Diane did not answer. What we've come to find out is that Diane left her cell phone along the highway, apparently in the median, next to a toll booth. And we know that because some passerby actually found the cell phone shortly afterwards and during the point where she was still driving. So they aren't sure where she went exactly during a period in time between 1 o'clock and 1:33, in between Taconic and the Briarcliff Manor. But someone didn't call 911 after noticing that she had gone on the edge of the highway on the northbound exit ramp. She entered a do not enter or one-way area the wrong direction. Within the next minute or two, there were 4 more 911 calls. People reporting that she was traveling down the wrong way, going about 80 miles an hour. Now, Schuler traveled for about 1.7 miles in the northbound passing lane before she collided head-on. It was approximately 1:35 p.m. She hit a 2004 Chevrolet Trailblazer, which then struck a 22 Chevrolet Tracker. Now, 2 people who witnessed the accident ran up to the car, and when they opened the door, Diane was dead and fell out of the car, and next to her was an empty bottle of Absolute vodka. When they turned and looked in the car, what they saw was nothing less than a horror. The children were piled on top of one another. They did manage to find the 5-year-old boy still alive, though very, very hurt. There were no other survivors. The only way that the youngest boy survived was that he was lodged and protected by the other children. This is surveillance footage of Diane, the last known footage. There's her walking past the counter, looking for a leave. She walks to the counter. She asks if they have it. She then leaves, heads back to the minivan. You'll see that she drives away, and this is the last footage we see of Diane. For someone who has that many children in the car, she does seem to drive away fairly aggressively. And that's the end of the footage. Her family did not want to believe
Telling
that
everyone who's
she
here,
was
obviously
on drugs,
this is Daniel Schuler, the husband.
or had
That's
had
his
anything to
sister-in-law,
drink that
Joyce
day.
Schuler. We have
Joyce.
Jay Schuler. And we have Tom Ruskin, who's
And
my
Jay.
investigator. And one of my sons, Lance, is here.
Her sisters
All right.
refused to believe the toxicology reports. And Daniel, her husband,
We want to speak to you about the events
as
that
you'll come
occurred.
to find out, also
And
denied what they
I'll
said.
tell you quite candidly that I didn't see any real benefit, except my client wants to talk about his wife and some of the events. I can tell you in the 38 years I'm practicing law, this case has captured me and and just devastated my understanding of what life should be. On the day in question, on the day in question, they were not getting divorced. They were not in marital counseling. They had no marital problems. She was not an alcoholic. She rarely had a drink. She got in the...
Now, this was what they were telling people at the time period. This was immediately after, within a week or so. And what you will come to hear everybody say is a complete denial of what they actually knew. Which is why I urge you to reach to your loved ones when you see the darkness fall on them, when you see the shadows creep in. Because oftentimes the strongest among us are the weakest inside. And all of the facade allows the darkness to creep in through every little nook and cranny of crack that is being shellacked and painted over. It's up to us around our loved ones to know them and not to just trust that they're okay, but to see who they are and not who they portray. Because sometimes folks aren't telling you who they are. They're telling you who they believe you wish them to be. And in this case, it's not just that. It seems to be, in Diane's case, her strengths allowed everyone else to create an insular space where she could do what she wanted without interruption. Because the truth about Diane is that she had been everyone's mother. Diane's own mother left, unfortunately, when she was young, and her response to that was to compensate by being the den mother at a young age and taking care of her own father. It was required in her case. Now, later on, she ended up marrying a man who, the story goes, it appears, allegedly, is the same or not too different. And in fact, there were reports that he was not even interested in having the children he had, that she was the one who chose to have them, the report goes. And what does this mean? Did she finally get fed up with being everybody's mother? Did she finally snap for some reason, from some argument that we could not comprehend? Was there something more in the story that we'll never know? Likely. Because can we ever know what people are thinking or feeling? I doubt it. Rather, let's hear how people create cognitive dissonance for themselves, or denial of what they actually truly do know, but they don't want others to, simply because it might slant someone they like, and spill the truth that would also implicate them in being complicit by supporting that person.
And with the children, 9 witnesses saw her that day, not drunk, with no alcohol breath, no pot breath. And what should have taken a 35-minute drive took almost 4 hours. Prior to getting into that car, she had numerous medical conditions, problems. One of them was an abscess which was almost 2 months old.
In the autopsy reports, there is no abscess causing her pain because the abscess was not found. Which is curious because she reported it to her husband and many others. which is why she was taking Aleve and other pills for the pain for quite some time, she said.
Which she would not go to the dentist for no matter how much he begged her. There was a swelling and there was pain on the left side.
I believe it was, yes.
She had diabetes at various levels. Excuse me. And then, remember the rule. If you want a question, you raise your hand. If not, I'll never point to you. Okay?
Okay.
She also had a lump on her leg, and the lump on the leg, we're not sure what it was, but it was moving. We have not yet decided to...
My understanding from the report is that is a sebaceous cyst on her leg.
have a new autopsy. Now, my client is a public safety officer in Nassau County under the police department. I will not allow any questions about marijuana use at all. Marijuana use is not a crime anymore. It's a public health violation, but I don't want that answered. And he will not, and if you ask it, I will stop the question.
And that right there could be the entirety of an issue. Because would, under that premise, someone just deny the entire truth as they know it because they don't want their loved one to take culpability for what they did, especially under advisory? Deny, deny, deny. Is that what we're about to see? Or is it that the cognitive dissonance is so distinct that deflection and denial are what we're seeing? I don't know. You decide.
Talk to you. What I think what you all should want to know about his wife, the child he lost, the niece and nephews, his child that survived, and the relationship with the wife. First question, please. Yes, sir. Speak up, sir.
Okay. Mr. Schuler, why did you not accompany your wife, or why did you take two cars back? Why did you have no kids with you? Can you go?
Yes.
Daniel Schuler, which
I
is
went up there a
Diane's
day
husband.
earlier to open up the camper and to get a little fishing in by myself before all the kids came up.
Can you talk about?
Good.
Can you talk about the range of emotions that you've gone through over the last several days?
Sad. Very sad. Upset. Lost my daughter, lost my wife. And all I have is my son.
How's your son doing?
Gonna be good, better, getting there.
His son had severe damage to his head and many broken bones. And it took many years for rehabilitation.
Are you angry at your wife?
No, not angry at her.
Has it split your family?
I'm sorry.
How can you explain her behavior
When?
that day?
Fine.
You mean before he got...
Before and after your conversations with her, she got you to take us through that morning.
As normal. She was fine. We had a cup of coffee in the morning. We packed the cars up like we always do. And we headed out. Just like every other weekend or every weekend we go up there.
I might tell you that my investigators have already interviewed people at the campsite. No one saw her that morning with alcohol, drunk, acting strange.
The opposite.
The opposite.
The opposite. She was happy, talking to people, gave a kiss goodbye to the owner of the camp,
And waved.
and that person smelled her breath.
Now, does that mean that someone is okay? How do we know that the darkness hasn't taken hold, that the shadow hasn't crept over? How do we know that Diane hasn't decided already what she wants to do? We don't. She's telling everyone that she's okay. Not only is she saying that, but she's putting her children and her nieces, all of her siblings' children, in her car. And it seems that she knew what she wanted to do from the moment she left that day. If one was to stand back and just say, this person is thoughtful and aware and, well, organized. Did she plan this? How long had she thought this out? Was this spur of the moment? Did everyone really know, and we would never know if they did or not? These shadows, some left completely unanswered, or best unanswered, I believe. But I warn and I urge the audience to stay aware, because these are the ghouls, these darkness, these shadow people that creep in through our spirits, through our dreams, in that semi-paralyzed state. These thoughts in the back of our head, the unthinkable, that some would let manifest into a plan that destroys everything that everyone around them and themselves loves. It's hard to understand what that is other than a monster. A monster that can take hold of someone and make them do the unthinkable.
There was definitely no alcohol when she left that campsite.
Mr. Schuler, do you believe that the 911 tapes will reveal anything helpful?
Next question, please.
Can you explain the bottle of
Sir.
vodka?
Yeah, the state police note that there was a bottle of absolute vodka in the van. Do you know where that came from, whose it was? Or can you explain?
No, I don't.
Do you think, were you aware, is it possible your wife may have had a drinking problem you weren't aware of?
Definitely
That's
not.
a very fair question, and let's start off with the questions asked. Did she have an alcohol problem? Did you know her to go to bars?
Absolutely not.
Did you know her to get drunk and act in?
I never saw her drunk since the day I met her.
Is it possible she was an alcoholic and you didn't know about it?
Your question, please.
Thank you.
Is it possible?
Are you saying that a medical condition could cause her to drink?
Well, we don't know.
And what is it that we don't know? How much is it that we don't know about the ones we love? Excuse me. Their intentions, their agendas, their ideas of well-being for us or themselves as comparative. What is it inside a person that gets them to say they will commit atrocity against everyone they know and themselves and strangers? What is it that gets someone who otherwise has everything in order, apparently, or from the outside, observably, to destroy life in a horrific manner, in a frightening manner where everyone must have felt in a panic much less those fragile, whose lives are cut short far before they had a chance to experience anything of life. And having that be something they experience at all, after you brought them into this world, it suggests that we should observe who we love, be cautious who we bring into our homes, look twice, look 3 times, because even those who have spent their lives alongside ours might be harboring something unimaginable, a shadow deep in them. For your sake and mine, I wish for anyone observing to avoid this at all costs.
Did she have a stroke and then have alcohol? You have to, if you believe the circumstances the way they are now described, you have to believe that a woman with 5 children in a car is smoking pot and drinking out of a bottle. By the way, the children in the car, and we can't tell you which one yet, spoke to the father, their father.
What did they say?
She doesn't feel well, but nothing else. And we have now an eyewitness who called me last night. You see, when she drives this distance, which should have been 40 minutes.
2.5 hours.
No. Where she went, leaving the campsite to where she had the accident, should be an hour?
Approximately, yes.
It's 3 hours of time used. She's on one side of the road. She crosses over dividers. She goes back over. This is not the actions of a person who's just drunk.
No, it's not. It's thought out. It's an act of building up courage. It's an act of aggression, acting out. It's an attempt to make the accident happen repeatedly, building up the feeling, trying different maneuvers. It's practice in real time. And I can only imagine the panic and terror inside of the vehicle as those inside became aware and triggered each other. A monster was driving that car that day.
Something happened. And I think something happened, I'll do you next. Something happened to her brain. That doesn't give me an answer. Does not give me an answer for the alcohol in her stomach or the marijuana allegedly there. And I'm not saying that test is wrong here, but something had to happen. This is not a woman who would jeopardize 5 children. She was the one they chose to always drive. Yes. Speak up.
Exhuming the body, are you planning to exhume her?
That question was asked, but I'll answer again. Question was, are we intending to exhume the body? And the answer is we have not decided. We have not gotten all the results yet from the medical examiner.
Sir,
Ma'am?
Mr. Schuler, did you speak with her at all during the trip?
Absolutely.
While she's driving home?
No.
I'm sorry.
Excuse me.
You know,
Just
which
throwing my
child
pepper.
spoke to her brother when he called, when she spoke to him on the phone? Do you know which child? I'm sorry?
It was Emma.
Emma? And do you know what the conversation was?
The first conversation was we had a great time. We're going to run a little bit late because they had play practice. And Diane said, Warren, we're running a little bit late. Emma and all the girls said they had a wonderful time.
At that moment in time, Aunt Diane had already driven around randomly. She had yet to stop at the gas station, but she was still communicating with her family. But at that point in time, she was being dishonest with her friends and her family when she was speaking to them on the phone. And in fact, she'd already begun to start to drive slightly erratically and aggressively, honking her horn and swerving through lanes.
Now, the question asked of her,
More than one conversation? Or?
one of the conversations asked of her was, are you all right? And this person who spoke to her said she didn't sound drunk, she didn't sound slurred speech, but she sounded confused. Now, an eyewitness contacted me last night through my service. They spoke to me and said that he was on the parkway and next to her. She was driving at a very slow rate, not swerving, and he dialed the police, which I'm trying to get the information on.
You said there were more than one conversation?
There were 3 conversations, 4 conversations, thank you, Tom, between...
Erratic, unusual, up to 30 phone calls, 911 calls, and reports about unusual driving or aggressive driving. I believe she was working up the courage.
The children and her, actually. Yeah, sure, go ahead.
What I think is important here, our investigation, we've only been involved for less than 24 hours now, has shown inconsistencies in the reporting of this incident. I've only seen that 1 call was received. We now know that there were 4 calls. We know where those calls went, and we're following up on those today. And we're going to try and determine what was said. Was she at all confused during those calls? Was she dazed? If we are going under the premise that she had a stroke at that point in time, at what point was she in her medical condition?
There ended up being no medical condition, no stroke, no alcohol caused by sugars or starches in the body because of a rare disorder, just a toxicology and blood alcohol rate that could be considered incredibly high by any state standards, as her blood alcohol rate was 0.19. In most states, it's 0.08, and you're going to jail. So when she says she couldn't see and she was confused, even though they think that she didn't sound drunk, clearly Aunt Diane had consumed the entire bottle of vodka with the children in the car.
By the way, the misgiving of information, we are not blaming... No, you can say that, Tommy. We're not blaming on the state police or the district attorney's office. It's just more information seems to be coming out. And again, this eyewitness, which I'm trying to get to meet with, or he is today, says that she seemed to be looking around as confused in some way, and he waved to her to maybe pull over, and she didn't. We don't have all of it yet, and we'll have to find out. The question asked, and I'd like to get to it, the human side for a moment.
That's what I was about.
Okay? This man loved this woman. He is in a daze from all of this. Absolutely.
As anyone
There
would
was
be.
no... Was there discussions of a divorce?
Absolutely not. I love my wife. We love each other.
There's been so much negative press now surrounding your wife. It couldn't be any worse. How do you want everyone to remember your wife?
She was a perfect wife, an outstanding mother, hard worker, reliable person, trustworthy. I would marry again tomorrow, but she's awesome. She's the best.
And your daughter. Tell us about your daughter.
It's my little girl. She's gone. I don't know what else to say about that. My little girl.
And will life go on now for you, focusing on your son?
Absolutely. I promised my wife I will take care of my son the way she wanted me to. That's what I'm gonna do.
Mr. Schuler, when did you receive the toxicology report and what was your reaction to it?
I don't think you've read it.
I don't know what you said.
He asked you, when did you receive the toxicology? I have not given him to read yet.
When you first so far, the autopsy said no signs of stroke or diabetes. Are you saying that?
That's not, first of all, what you're saying is what the newspaper said, correct?
And it's what the toxicology report reported. No diabetes. No aneurysm. No brain injury, no issue in the brain. No seizure.
Okay, well, let me tell you something. There was a name in the newspaper today that used to go to a bar with her and get drunk. The name was
Sheila.
Sheila. Did you ever meet a Sheila?
Never.
Did you ever speak to a Sheila?
Never.
When their lifestyle was that his wife would go to work, the babysitter who's here.
I watch my kids during the day. I work nights.
When the babysitter was there for a short time, then he'd leave to go to work, and then the wife came home. The babysitter has told me, I never saw her drunk. I never saw her smoke pot. I never and she was there how many days a week?
5 days, 4 or 5 days.
4 days a week. Okay.
If your paycheck relied on the people that you were being asked about, would you say you've seen that person do something that would be, in this case, incredibly problematic? Would you admit to them you'd seen them lift a bottle or roll a joint, smoke some weed? Would you? Or would you keep it to yourself, knowing that it's best to say nothing for your own best interest? What choice would you make based off the ethics? Would you tell everyone what you've seen in public or in private? What option would you take? Are these people even important to you? Or would that even matter? The ethics of this situation, much less the morality involved, for all parties, is as compounded and odd, as well as dangerous for everyone standing behind that microphone, everyone pointing out in this interview. I can't help but think there's a lot of reason for a lot of these folks to not say a word, whether it be for the memory of their loved one or for the culpability and accountability that comes with saying anything. Well, it's amazing what humans will do when the shadow takes over. The long hand wrapped around our neck. The pointy, way too wide grin. Well, good evening, tomfoolery crowd. What's up, fools? Are you ready to look at some pretty scary shit? And thanks so much, Tom. You're badass. What's going on, everybody? Thanks for being here. We're looking at Diane Schuler. What happened to Aunt Diane's story? Right now we're in the middle of the interview. You missed the ghost stories, but it's pretty much talking about how the shadows creep into us all. How we can avoid or not see the shadows creep into some people that we would just believe are high and mighty and got control of themselves and the world around them. But in actuality, what we might be avoiding is their dark demons and monsters. Because just like Diane Schuler, who left at 9:30 a.m., seemingly sober and perfectly happy with her 3 nieces and her 2 children. Well, that was a lie. And in fact, the shadow was some demon wrapped around her insides that no one knew about. That demon was a bottle and the interest to die. And she didn't care who she was going to affect. And that is where you get the deflection and avoidance of everyone around her deciding whether or not it's better to stay silent and take part in the shadow, or to tell the truth that they know. Because we know now, everybody here knew Diane's proclivities. And
I'm sorry.
About the her being drunk.
Well, you spoke out, and we're not going to do it that way. I know. I'll get to you.
What's his reaction to that?
Yes, sir? That's okay. I just want to keep it organized. I think we're doing great.
Fools.
I will come back to you, ma'am.
911 tapes. Do you think they'll be helpful?
I think that the 911 tapes will tell us a lot. We're working in conjunction with the state police and the prosecutor's office to really try and understand for Daniel and his family's purpose what really happened here. This is so out of character for this woman. There has to be some other explanation.
Yes, ma'am.
So my question is, when you heard the toxicology report that she was supposedly drunk and high, what was your reaction?
I'm not sure. Would never have.
Shocked?
It's not true.
Can you just elaborate a little?
These are the people closest to her.
I mean, if you're saying it was totally out of character, can you just elaborate a little?
Unbelievable, right?
Shocked, say it. Not true.
I think Joyce is someone you also might want to speak to. Jane, I mean. Which? Jay, I apologize. Come over, Jay. All right. This was her dearest friend, close relative, married to her.
Your full name, please?
It's her sister-in-law.
Jay Schuler.
You're married to?
I'm married to Danny's brother, Jimmy Schuler. Diane was my sister-in-law. Jay, J-A-Y. Diane was my sister-in-law. I've known Diane for years. Diane and I spent a lot of time together. I left the country to visit relatives, and I left my son, Evan, in Diane's care. She drove him back and forth to school. She drove him back and forth to baseball.
Which brings me to remind you that these people we love, whom we trust, who we expect to have our best interest and the best interest of the ones we love, we should always observe closely, with care and kindness. Because it's when we stop looking closely and start taking for granted their behaviors, their thoughts, their feelings, what have you, it could actually be that we're missing the bigger picture, the broader sense of what's actually going on with them. These are the people closest to her, but Aunt Diane killed 8 people that day, including 81-year-old Michael Bastardi, his 49-year-old son Guy Bastardi, and their friend 74-year-old Dan Longo in the vehicle that she ran into. Once again, the only survivor was her 5-year-old son Brian. All 3 of her nieces and her daughter died. Toxicology report released on August 4th found that Schuler had a blood alcohol content, once again, of 0.19%. The approximately 6 grams of alcohol in her stomach that had yet to be absorbed into her blood, meaning that she drank the rest of the bottle, was putting her way beyond the limit, obviously. She also had a massive level of THC in her system, meaning that she was smoking in the car, actually, is what the toxicology report suggests, is that within the last 15 minutes before she hit, she'd been smoking with kids in the car. What causes the darkness to take over one's sensibilities? Because Diane Schuler was challenging other drivers and driving in and out of lanes for quite some time before she actually turned around and went up the wrong way on an on-ramp. What did they miss? What can we miss? Was this her own idea? How long had it festered? This is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about the darkness and the shadows that might be just hanging over someone's bed in that moment between waking state and dreams. That thin line where that tall shadow climbs over and hangs and looms. Is that what crawled into her? Is that what tapped at her window? Did it take her soul? Or was that just Diane? And is it something so benign as the den mom that everybody trusts that we should all really look twice at? Is it an example or an anomaly? Seems like anomaly in some degree. Unfortunately, the next 3 nights I'll be covering mirrored stories of just this. The ghouls, the creeps, those things that would take over your soul from those you trust and take away those you love unexpectedly. The real world has the real monsters. The fantasies are there to draw us away like a magic trick. Look at the left hand, while the right hand pats you on the head.
Anything I needed with Evan, she was there. There was nobody. We trust family, nobody else. Diane, I didn't have to leave a list of telling her what to do. It's automatic. She knew what to do. Diane was a nanny before she became a Cablevision executive. She loved children. Her nieces were her girls. There's no way. I've known Diane. We socialize. We do family barbecues. Family was the most important thing to her. To have the cousins all playing together. There is no way she would ever jeopardize the children.
There wasn't any health problem that contributed to her uncharacteristic.
Diane was very. Diane would not.
Well, how would she know?
I'm just saying, did she ever have?
Diane was a trooper. She would never complain. She would not go to a doctor. She was a trooper. Nothing hurt her.
But she never had. She wasn't like suicidal.
No.
That's a fair question. Was she psychiatrically suicidal? No. Depressed when she talked about that?
Absolutely not.
No way. Absolutely not.
She loved her kids. And Erin, who is my goddaughter, our little girl.
If you loved your children, if you loved your goddaughter, her goddaughter, why then did you take them on the last ride she would take? A terror ride. A ride of sheer horror in the end. What was said, we will never really know. We've only got snippets from the phone call. But how deep in the veil, how much in the darkness, how much grief causes one to not see what one's loved one chose to do. We can almost see the pain and the disbelief in the face of the lady behind, Daniel.
This is breaking news from Las Vegas Review Journal.
My apologies. I have a fat finger. It might take
Could
us
be
someplace
happening in a situation like this.
Unexpected.
So first I'll take a look at the background. This section is fairly brief. Then the timeline of the crime. Then the mental health and personality characteristics. So starting with the background, there's not really a lot of information about Diane's background. She was 36 at the time of the accident. She was married. She had a 5-year-old son and a 2-year-old daughter. She worked full-time in accounting and made about $100,000 per year.
So once again, she had
credibility in 3 easy steps.
One of the kind of personalities who would be considered, well, high expectation of herself and from the people around her. She had a job that most people would love to have because it paid everybody's bills. She was the breadwinner in the household. So, with that alpha personality, let's say, high drive, are we missing something? Did something get jilted in her? Or did she just get tired? Because once again, I remind you, her mother left when she was a child. And then she became her own father's mother and the housewife, taking care of all the other children and her father. And then when she married Daniel, it's reported that she took care of him as well. And everybody's kids, being the general driver and the PTA mom, and a lot of compensation, a lot of time, a lot of effort. She was always dressed to the nines, they say. Is it actually, in fact, the fact that she was overcompensating? Or did she just hit her final line of capability and break?
Witness, and it doesn't make sense that that store wouldn't have Tylenol, right? That's what she was ostensibly looking for. And it doesn't make sense that he could evaluate her that accurately in a couple seconds. So whatever happened in the store, I think, is really more of an unknown. It doesn't really add any value to understanding the collision later on. Not long after 11 a.m., Diane left Liberty, New York, and traveled on the interstate toward the Tappan Zee Bridge. We see reports that she was honking her horn, tailgating, flashing her headlights, changing lanes. So we see dramatic and aggressive driving. One couple reported they were bracing for impact because Diane was so close to their vehicle with the tailgating. Interestingly, they didn't call the police. Perhaps this type of driving had become a little too common in New York. A side note here, I live about 3 hours from New York, and I've driven there many times, all 5 boroughs, Long Island, and further north like Yonkers and White Plains, which would be closer to the Tappan Zee Bridge. Aggressive driving appears to be much more accepted in that environment. I've literally been behind vehicles where one driver changed lanes into the other, and both.
So I have to point out that I'm not sure if a validation of aggressive driving, like honking and swinging in and out of lanes aggressively, as well as changing over on the highway repeatedly, is normal. I don't think that's normal, but I could be wrong. I'm not from the East Coast. If you did that in LA, something bad would happen. Let's just say that. Somebody would be chasing you or something. Something terrible would happen.
Drivers just kept on driving after exchanging some colorful gestures, almost like this is just an everyday thing. I've also seen situations where there's a car on fire in the middle of the road and people were driving by it on each side, like it wasn't even there. Some were even yelling at the car's owner to move the car, which of course doesn't make any sense.
By the way, that's just
the car's air
humanity.
conditioning couldn't keep up when a car is on fire. It would be uncomfortably warm in that environment. Now, in some other areas of the United States, if 2 door mirrors touch in a parking lot, people are on the phone trying to get a SWAT team to come out. So we see a lot of different levels of tolerance in terms of aggressive driving. Now getting back to this collision, at 11:37 a.m., Diane called her brother Warren Hance, the father of Diane's 3 nieces who were in the vehicle, and informed him that she was being delayed by traffic.
Now, we've just heard that in the interview. And we know that that's not true at this point in time because there are other reports simultaneously that say that she was driving aggressively. It's normal in New York and nowhere else. Yes, I would, yes.
Minutes later, Diane was spotted off to the side of the road, on her hands and knees, like she was sick. She did the same thing at a rest area not long after this. At this point, the situation...
Which is a question. Is this grief? Is this illness? Is this pain? Is this drunkenness? We don't know. Tailgate and swerve lanes. So maybe it is normal driving procedure. Maybe there's too much made of that. I don't know. We know what the outcome is later. Is it just that it fits with the program and the story? That could be a bias. True.
It's not looking good. Yet, it would be an hour and 15 minutes before there was another contact. Diane is somewhere near the Tappan Zee Bridge at around 1 p.m. At this time, a call was placed from Diane's phone to her brother. One of Diane's nieces tells Warren that Diane is not speaking clearly and she's having difficulty with her vision.
Could
Warren
be
tells Diane
nausea.
to stop
Yeah,
driving.
exactly. Zyrax, hey, what's happening? Good evening and welcome on in. It could be nausea. It's hard to say because we don't know other than what we see in the toxicology. Now, if she'd been imbibing that much alcohol, I'd gather it was nausea. I mean, that's a lot of vodka she had in her stomach that had yet to process.
He would come to get her. According to the HBO documentary, several wrong numbers were also dialed from Diane's phone. After this, Diane leaves her phone on the side of the road and continues to drive. At this point, Diane drove north, away from her house, and entered an exit ramp for the Taconic State Parkway.
So, once again, one of the oddities of where she left her phone is that she left it in the median, somewhere where it was found shortly thereafter. It almost seems intentional, or that she wished for someone to find it.
Briarcliff Manor.
Why not
She
just throw it out the
accelerates
window?
as she's heading south in the northbound lanes. Witnesses reported that they had to veer out of the way to avoid an impact with the Ford Windstar. Evidently, Diane had an intense expression on her face. She appeared to be laser focused on her driving. At 1:35 p.m., after driving 1.7 miles, Diane, now traveling about 85 miles an hour, slams into a 2004 Chevrolet Trailblazer carrying 3 adult males. Those 3 men, Diane, Diane's 3 nieces, and her daughter, would die. Her son Brian survived with head injuries and bone fractures. A broken bottle of vodka was found in the Ford Windstar. Autopsy results indicated that Diane was intoxicated. Her blood alcohol concentration was 0.19%, almost 2.5 times the legal limit. She also had quite a bit of THC in her system, the active ingredient in cannabis. After the accident, we see that Diane's husband, Daniel Schuler, denies that Diane had any type of difficulty with substances. At first he said neither one of them had consumed alcohol during that camping trip, but later he changed his story, saying that they did, but Diane did not.
He said she didn't drink on a regular basis. Well, she never drank. Oh, well, she only drank on the vacation. Well, she never drank to excess. With the story changing, the credibility starts to adjust as well, right? Both the cognitive dissonance and or the inability to look at the situation head on drops the confidence a lot.
Drank the day before the crash. Daniel and others have brought up a variety of theories, like Diane had a stroke, she had this problem with one of her teeth that was causing her pain, essentially arguing that the alcohol and the THC in her system should be ignored.
All unfounded.
Because there was some other type of mysterious medical event that explained the collision. Now moving to the mental health and personality factors, and also trying to answer the questions, what happened here?
This is why we're actually watching him. As dry as he is against my dry, with the dry on dry, we'll play some mustard or something afterwards. Sorry, Lita. But yeah, he has an actual professional psychological view, or at least some kind of breakdown for this. And I find it interesting because at least we can get some kind of answers of the personality that we're looking at or for when it comes to keeping an eye out for those who we trust, who we love, who seem to have our best interest in most cases, but then at some point, without our knowledge, without them ever giving us a hint or telling us anything, they throw the whole table over. They pull the wool over your eyes, and then they pull the rug out from underneath your feet, and then find 4 more metaphors to light fire to, and hand you some coffee or tea, whatever works out, just to add to it. Dumpster, yeah, you dumpster and some gas, you know what I mean, for no reason, just because. As they say, c'est la vie, but no one deserves that. There's no reason for it. No one earns that. And no one should be at the end of a whip that comes out of nowhere. At least give them a warning. It's horrifying.
Was Diane
truly terror
of murder? In this case, we see Diane Schuler, a hardworking mother of 2 who's highly conscientious and highly extroverted, causes this horrific collision and is clearly intoxicated at the time. We also see Daniel Schuler and others who believe there must be some other type of explanation outside of substance use. They say that Diane would never have done this deliberately or even recklessly. So I'll look at 3 main theories here that come up in this case and talk about how likely it would be that any one of these would have occurred. The first theory is that Diane had some sort of medical problem and that caused this collision. As part of this theory, we can include this idea that maybe she had 1 drink because she was in pain, and then some sort of terrible reaction occurred that caused her to drink the whole bottle. This theory really seems to be born out of denial. The autopsy is fairly clear. There is no medical condition reported here that could have caused this accident. She didn't have any problems with her teeth. The examination indicated there was no stroke or any other problem, again, that could have led to this accident.
Which leads me to believe that there were a lot of excuses made for maybe what was already known under the surface, just wasn't being admitted to by the other parties. Or maybe, truly, they didn't know. There is the old adage, there is something you can know, something you can't know, something someone else knows, and something someone else knows that they aren't going to tell you. So in this case, maybe it's, Brother Jumbi, what's happening? Welcome on in. Good to see you. Hope you're having a good evening. Looking at Diane Schuler right now, but I was sharing... Oh, you're having a little movie night. That's rad. Nice. Yeah, we're talking about Diane Schuler right now, kind of wrapping that around with a kind of a synopsis of what her mindset might have been. And I was talking about earlier, tied in the story of shadow people, which I think you're familiar with, which feel free to call in at any time because I know you've got your stories about it. And talking about the long hand of the shadow person in your sleep paralysis and how it really can creep in, and asking what their agenda is or what they really are there for, how they're tied into us from the beginning of time, and how in many ways something like Diane can happen because of the shadows in people's spirits or souls who just allow them to fester, with all of us standing there watching and not really being aware that there's a demon inside our own loved ones. So please feel free to, if you've got the time, come on in. The stream is fine.
There's also this theory about migraines, like perhaps that caused the vision problems that she was reporting. Maybe that caused her to be looking for something like Tylenol, although again, I don't feel like that's a reliable statement given by that worker at the gas station. But either way, if she had migraines, that could explain some things, but it doesn't explain why there was this collision under these circumstances. It could explain a different type of collision, I think like a minor accident, but I find it hard to believe that a migraine could cause somebody to drive the wrong way down a highway at 85 miles an hour.
Not to mention, imbibe an entire bottle of vodka, a full double-handled bottle, leaving 6 ounces in her stomach. That's incredible, if you think about it. I don't know if you... Go pour 6 ounces of just water, and then compare that to... That's almost a full, tall glass of water of just vodka in your stomach. Oh, sleep paralysis. Yes, we were talking about the shadow people. And, you know, I didn't get into specifics, but I did mention one of them, the man in the tall hat. That's a well-known one that's observed by all different cultures and people around the world. It's a universal amongst humanity, actually. A strange thing that happens when we're in that state. And I pose the question of whether or not this is something we've been living symbiotically with since the beginning of time, like Doctor Who suggests, you know, like the silence. And when we see them, they wipe our memories of them, so we would never know that we actually saw them. And how frightening would it be to have that living in our spaces all around us? Maybe they're in the frame right now, staring at the camera with you and with me. But we can't see them because we can't remember them. Or are they just shadow? Are they in our memories? Or are they built into our dreams? Either way, it's creepy as fuck when that shit leans over your bed, standing there and you can't move because your arms and your legs don't work, because your brain has them turned off, but you can still use your eyes. So your brain is filling in the space. Is that real? Well, as far as your brain's concerned, it actually is. They've been done tons of testing on what happens when you go to sleep, and if they can actually program direction to see your head light up, basically your brain light up in the areas that would cause otherwise your body to move or your hands to squeeze, or you know, physical responses as opposed to autonomic responses. But physical responses that you program in before you go to sleep, and then when a CAT scan is done, lo and behold, the same area that lights up when you do that motion when you're awake is doing it when you're asleep without your body moving. So dreams are as real as reality as far as your brain is concerned. And that is an excellent question, Cyrax. If they're spirits, what do they intend? And why does the shadow creep in and above us? Why does it reach out to us? Why does it tap on our window? Why does it crawl under our bed and bump in the wall? And then loom? Why is it stand in the corner viewing us so that only it can be seen by us and the corner of our eye? Why is it that just in the periphery these things exist? Is it because we fear them too much? Oh, very cool. Shamanism. Of which branch? Like, I'd be interested to hear about that. I'm going to be doing an occult / metaphysics night coming up here soon. Break out some of my grimoire. Open up the old sacred-text.com and get deep into the old, you know, all kinds of things. Maybe look at the Seals of Solomon, like, directly, and do some crazy stuff. You know what I mean? Some things. I'd love to hear about it. I believe that being rooted to the nature of things, being rooted to the ground and the world around us, and utilizing the gifts of that science that comes almost fundamentally from observation via shamanism and then the altered states of consciousness that has been practiced by shamans at the beginning of time, as well as the altered states of perception of self and some of the values of what someone would call, well, drunken chaos magic, meaning utilizing altered states of consciousness to traipse across perception barriers, breaking the veil. I'm fascinated by that. Yeah, you're always welcome at any time, by the way. And you know, if anybody has a story about shadows or shadow people or their experiences with sleep paralysis or people they know who have had demons creep in when one would least expect it from people they love. Now, I know that most people don't have a Diane Schuler, thankfully, in their family. But these things happen in lots of different ways. And we can talk about avatars at another time, because I will also, I believe, this month talk about a group that everyone should be more aware of. It's called the Order of the Process. And they use avatars to feed energy and pain to an entirely other group, not them. It's a group that they essentially worship. And they send avatars out in the world as a buffer, where they receive and look forward to the pain and regret of the work they've done 5 to 10-fold over in reciprocation or reciprocity. That buffer allows another group to receive the benefits of their work and the work of the avatars. It's an insidious world we live in, with a lot of unknowns and darkness and shadow, and in some cases horror. Now, most of us don't want to look at it because it stares back, for fear that you say its name 3 times and it appears. The superstitions of our earliest faith and belief, they're rooted in our souls and DNA. Cyrax says, your father was a practicing shaman. As a matter of fact, tomorrow will be 12 years since. I'm sorry to hear that he passed, but I'm excited that that you're from that line. I'm fascinated, and actually, I'd like to hear it online, and I'd like to swap some notes with you offline, actually. I'd like to hear your thoughts on some things. I'm actually, Brother Jumbi should be involved in that conversation as well. He's got some serious experience as well. And we all come from different schools. That's interesting. Yeah, it's a rare occurrence. Thank you for being here, Zyra. Neat.
Now, in addition to denial, there could be people in this type of situation who want to escape responsibility. No better way to protect yourself than to go on the offensive. It's impossible to know at this point, but it seems likely that some people close to Diane were aware that she had a problem with alcohol. We see these stories that say, well, the autopsy showed she didn't have cirrhosis of the liver, so that means that she could not have been drinking for a while. So it wouldn't be terribly unusual that she could have been drinking and had an absence of liver damage. Now, if she had been drinking heavily for a long time, like she was 50 or 60, then that type of damage.
Accepting I don't believe, based off of the behaviors and the erratic sensibility or the fact that nobody else knew, I don't think that she had been drinking excessively. I think that she did that, once again, for courage. Oh, you're welcome to jump in at any time. Like, literally now, there's a call-in always open. But yeah, anytime you see the call-in up and we're talking about something, you know, that you're interested in, you know you're always welcome, by the way. Is that right?
Would be more likely. But at her age, she could have easily had no liver damage and still been drinking quite regularly. Some people have said that Daniel and others must be telling the truth. Otherwise, why would they have fought this long if they were lying? Well, they could be doing this, again, because of denial. By definition, this would put it out of conscious awareness. It's not a matter of necessarily refusing to accept the truth. It's more of a situation where somebody cannot accept the truth.
Ah, conscious awareness, cognitive dissonance. It's not that they can't see it, it's that they can't actually accept it. And or won't. And that is part of the same thing. It's not something consciously being done. It is something unconsciously happening, pulling wool over their own eyes. Now, you could put a lot of negative terms to it, but it is very common for folks to be very defensive in their own minds about the people they love and trust when hurt by them, because it reflects upon their own accountability, their own state of being, their own sensibility, and their own choices. It reflects on them because they end up looking like, oh, well, maybe I made a bad choice. Now, the character then is presumed by whether or not they have the humility to say, not the best choice. We did see some of this. I'm aware. I really didn't want to look at it, though. The humility of observation and acceptance and accountability after the fact, even. It's a powerful courage that most people lack the foresight to understand in perspective and or in foresight is more important than whether or not you knew in the get-go. Because at least if you have the humility to say, oh, I just didn't see it because I was so in love. Ugh, I have no clue. Ugh, I have some fallibility. I'm a human. You at least are attempting to show that you either didn't know or that you were going to learn from the episode. Rational fallibility goes a long way to clearing the darkness with light. The humility to say, I'm a fool. Call me the king of it. Happily so. Just don't forget, the fool rushes in where angels fear to tread, but is wrapped by angels' wings. For the angels follow close behind.
The truth isn't even an available option because it would be too painful. So going back to this potential cause, this idea that what happened was truly an accident and Diane was not responsible, I see this option as nearly impossible. A fantasy made up by people who will not or cannot come to terms with Diane's behavior.
As a matter of fact, I hate to say it, but I will, because I don't believe that these things should remain unsaid just for the sake of comfort of some. A monster crawled into that car and took those children on a ride that they should never have had experienced or chance to be part of. How can one see her as anything but a shadow as a human? How can anyone see her as anything but a demon or a ghoul or a poltergeist behind the wheel, earning the courage and lying to her family and running around in circles with her children in tow and her sister-in-law's children? No sweats, Irax. I appreciate you. What is it that gets you to finally say, what the hell? Is it the darkness, or is it a choice? Is it something else altogether?
I would never underestimate people's ability to hide substance use. I've seen people that were regularly, severely impaired, and yet people around them did not know. They may have known something was a bit off, but they didn't know substances were involved. Also, some people who use substances develop fairly good manipulation skills. They want the high from whatever their drug of choice is, and they're going to get it no matter what. Behind the facade that people put up, there are all types of mental health problems, depression, anxiety, obsessions, traumatic memories, all types of fears, and of course, substance use. All these are more hidden than visible, and yet people seem surprised when they discover someone who suffers from one or more of these symptoms.
And my question would be, are we actually looking at addiction? Or are we looking at someone whose facade had finally cracked? Was the alcohol just a deadening tool to deaden the nerves and the fears state? Was the daily weed just a way to numb the sensibilities and it started to wear off? What are we looking at but someone who had everything in their hands and control of the entire situation do something so horrific that it almost seems malicious towards other people? Was it that other people weren't noticing? I don't believe this has anything to do with addiction. I don't believe it even has to do with the alcohol. The alcohol is a red herring for the situation. Diane Schuler was a first-person kind of mind, leading the trail, in charge in every situation. And I would gather that maybe she just became done because the obsessive qualities, the heightened level of stress, the intense level of awareness, control, face, persona, you name it, the few hours of sleep, and the lies that she must have been carrying with her to provide everyone else the show that maybe she felt like an imposter over. We can only ponder, but my hypothesis is simple. She hated that everyone relied on her. It seethed in her like a monster, like a dragon inside her, a dark shadow dragon. And one day, it said, enough.
Moving on to the second theory. This theory says that Diane became intoxicated, and this caused her to drive in a way that led to the crash. So under this theory, she's still culpable, but it was more like the drinking just got out of control, and she really didn't know what she was doing. The collision would not have been premeditated this way. This wasn't first-degree murder or suicide, but rather somebody who was just driving drunk and unintentionally caused the deaths of 8 people. I think this is possible. It could be that she was so intoxicated that she simply had no idea what she was doing. There have been other wrong-way collisions that were caused by drunk drivers who did not appear to intentionally get on the highway in the wrong direction. Their driving has often been described as erratic, a lot of crossing into other lanes, taking turns wide, not reacting quickly when something happens in front of their vehicle. So here's the thing with this theory. Usually those who drink excessively become somewhat accustomed to driving while intoxicated. This doesn't mean they're good drivers. Drinking and driving is always dangerous. It just means that they learn how not to get caught. At some level, they are aware of their own intoxication and might try to mitigate the amount of trouble that they can get in. For example, they might pull off.
In this case, I don't think she had any experience driving drunk. I think she knew that that would add to the issues. Excuse me.
To the side of the road, drive slowly, wait a long time at a stop sign or a traffic light before pulling into an intersection. It's not always dramatic, aggressive driving. Often it's rather a subdued, confused driving pattern. For those that go directly to incredibly aggressive driving, often they get caught much earlier in their criminal career. A person can't drive the wrong way on a road too many times before getting arrested. It's one of those things that other drivers tend to notice, even in areas where aggressive driving is normally tolerated. To reduce her inhibition, so she could carry out this plan. As she continued to drink that morning, feelings of depression,
This is what I believe
despair,
as well.
anxiety, whatever was going on with her, intensified. Her quick consumption of alcohol caused her to feel sick, explaining why she pulled over a couple of times. It may also explain why she may have been seeking something like Tylenol.
Cyrax says what they didn't understand was that she pulled over multiple times and yet she kept driving again. When the niece called her dad to inform her of her vision problems, why did he go get them? Yeah. Well, one of the reports in one of the interviews after the fact, long after the fact, there is some suggestion that the father was less than interested, that discounting what was going on there might have been something, well, it's par for the course of the situation, where somebody didn't care. If that makes any sense, Cyrax. That there was a lack of care. Which might have also added to the stress of somebody who was so extreme in their supremacy and their intent to be better than others when it comes to being a mom, being the leader, being the breadwinner. That kind of pressure with that kind of disrespect. Who knows? We don't know, but it's could be something. It suggests that there was definitely a bridge that wasn't being crossed, if at all used. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Her suffering and her inability to cope with emotions led to aggressive, yet still to some degree, precise driving. Witnesses reported she was deliberate in moving from lane to lane.
Sorry, buddy.
She drove with a purpose. It was not random. She wasn't necessarily all over the road for a lot of that time. Eventually, she reached a point where her inhibitions were gone. She left her phone on the side of the road to avoid being tracked. At this point, she made her way to the exit ramp and drove the wrong way down the parkway. Witnesses reported that they were honking their horns, flashing their lights, and waving at her. She ignored all the warnings and accelerated to a speed that would generate a fatal collision.
85 miles an hour.
Even though I believe that the second theory could happen, I actually believe that this theory is the most probable. Driving down the highway in the wrong direction is typically a deliberate act. Maybe some people could actually pull onto an exit ramp in the wrong direction because they're impaired, but most of the time they would realize that something's not right and stop their vehicle. She did not do this. She persisted. She continued until there was a massive collision. I think it's like
Diane Schuler. At the age of 36 years old, careened her car down the road with 3 of her nieces and 2 of her children and a bottle of vodka. We will never know the true answers. We can only consider and take the words of those who knew her best. But what we do know is that darkness crawled into the car, a demon, a monster, not a human, not Diane. Not to take away her blame or accountability, but to explain how someone that everybody can love can turn into this thing that we see in the in-between. This grinning monster at the end of our bed. An unseen force, a dark, tall figure, sometimes in a tall hat, or just maybe a grinning set of sharp teeth, wider than it should be, in a grimace. beady red eyes glaring and glowing back in the darkness as we are unable to move. We feel the pressure on our throat and chest. Was this what Diane was feeling? Was this part of the weight that caused her to snap? What causes someone we love to do the unthinkable? Is it something tiny? Is it something we would never know? Diane showed us that we would never know. Or at least those around her may have reason to not tell us. Either way, 8 people died that day. And we should remember them. 81-year-old Michael Bastardi, his 49-year-old son Guy Bastardi, 74-year-old Dan Longo, and the last surviving member, the 3 nieces, Diane and Daniel's daughter, and the only surviving person at that point, 5-year-old Brian, who would be just becoming an adult right now. I hope for them for the best. I hope they've gotten to move on, and I hope that demon has never returned and will never return. And I hope that all their answers and all their questions are had. We stand in these forests alone. We go through the journey step by step, a singular entity inside of ourselves. Call it a meat sack. An autonomous machine pumping full of blood and energy, tendril-like spindles of vessel and meat wrapped around a hardened surface, pretending it exists from inside an imagined concept. Are we vapor too? Are the shadows a mirror of us? Is it us staring back in a different way? You tell me. The call-in line is open. You are currently viewing a night walk through Aokigahara Forest, the most haunted forest in Japan. I figured if one was going to do some scary shit, this would probably be it. Because despite all of us being adults likely in the room, I am more than sure that most of us would need diapers for this adventure, just because going single-handedly, solo into the woods, even if you know there's nothing dangerous in them, in the dark, it's a harrowing journey for any human. It plays on every one of our fears, every one of our concepts of what we shouldn't do. You see, early on, man's eyes learned how to focus in dark and light. And we've referenced what is healthy and what is not by looking at, well, are you part of the dark magic? Are you part of the light magic? And that's because we think that the things that can harm us come in the dark. Hunters who have better eyes than us make us prey. Therefore, the light is our friend, right? But it also is something where our eyes formed over a very long period of time and adapted to the environment and also to our psyche and our needs, both in the color spectrums we perceive and also the light spectrum values, meaning that how much luminosity lights up the cones and rods in our eyes. So some animals have low lumen perception. Moonlight looks like sunlight to them. Lumens, by the way, are a value for light, or is a value for light. It's how you measure light, by volume. If you ever see a guy on a movie set walking around with a lumen meter, that's what they're measuring, is light value. How much light is over here? Is it the same as over here? Same as over here? Is it the same as over here? Is it still the same as over here? It's still the same as over here, right? No, it's the same as over here. Okay, look over here. The same as over here? No, look over here. Oh, it's still the same as over here. I shit you not. That's what they're doing. Good God. Yeah. Measuring light. So, our brains pick the easiest course. Why don't we just tune out all the shit we don't want to see? Especially if it's in the dark. Just tune that shit out. Then we're not afraid of it anymore. We can live in peace. That's what happened. So now, the rods in the back of our eyes and the ocular cavity and the nerves in the back of the ocular cavity have become receptacles currently. They don't see very well in the dark without adaptation, slow adaptation at that. And then the UV range is almost unseen to us completely. It has to be lit up by a matching value that then looks shimmery, right? And purple. Well, in actuality, what you didn't know is UV is darkness. Pretty weird, right? When you light up a UV light, you're putting darkness out of phase. Weird. Oh yeah, now we're walking through the Ekigahara forest. The darkness inside of us can come from many places. It doesn't just have to be a ghoul over the bed. It can come from influence. It can come from belief. It can come from a limitation in exposure to many things. And by that, it can also be exposure to many things, or too many. Or the use of others as avatar, and where the darkness can be set upon you. Or manifested in you. But most of the time, it takes the willingness to be open to those things. Have you been open to it? Has it found you? Has it found its way to your doorstep? I hope not. There are answers for that, all dependent upon what you're experiencing. But key to it is, if you tune it out, just like the color spectrums, well, it has a hard time existing. It's kind of a weird thing. But belief and faith, turns out, somebody won some Nobel Prizes this year over the fact that they proved or showed theoretically, that's weird, showed theoretically, yeah, well, brought the math to the table to show that reality is locally observed, meaning it forms because of our observation of it. So does it exist when we're not there? These are the questions. These are the days of our lives. True. Scariest forest in the world. Well, if nobody has a story tonight, I'm going to close this out with one last thought. It is found that we live in a universe that may actually be a multiverse, not unlike a video game, a holographic display, where matter is created, the friction, static, response of explosive light that stays just ahead as a precursor wave to the actual physical reality that chases it. There are many oddities to the gravity well that pulls and churns everything out in the vacuum of space in this particular universe. But one of the most interesting things about our being, the existence of all, is the darkness that prevails, the vacuum that we can't perceive. Like the shadow in the corner, it looms larger than us by 10 quadrillion trillion billion times. Here or there, give or take. In other words, 93% of what we can't perceive is what we would call dark matter, which is a hypothetical concept. It is a theoretical, meaning we know it is something, but it has a number of different values to it. It is not actually a mathematical proven item, but rather a theoretical, conceptual item used to describe something we can't perceive. Now, is this dark matter just like the shadow being, a realm that we just can't see upon our own? Or is it because our perceptions have not reached a higher dimension value, that we can't see that light wave or the reflection thereof? Is there a light wave that reflects off of it? Are we meant to not see it altogether? Or are we so minuscule in the system of value of our existence that we are the speck hanging around the shadow, and it observing us is like Horton hearing a who? Is that why the shadow beings are so interested in us and so transcendental? There and scary to us because they are unknown and we don't know what they want. Or are they part of the background that we're just new to? These are the things that will leave the mark on you when you close your eyes, if you dare. The only battle against all of these impeding forces of dark upon our spirits, upon our minds, upon our dream, is a small amount of faith in each other, to be derived from anyone and anywhere. It just takes the ability to see and look and have the empathy to others, to see others as the self, and not to see them as others, but as part of one in a multiverse of uncountable, with a permutation value measured in a statistical ratio of bubbles upon bubbles upon bubbles, as in 360 degrees by 360 degrees to the power of 360. That is the permutation of any option and motion or thought or action in reality at every point. Kind of hard to perceive. Take every pixel in this frame, every pixel, and build a bubble outside of it by 360 degrees, the 360th. You heard the math, 360 by 360 to the 360th power. It's a lot of permutations of any one pixel in all directions. So consider that. that the reality around us, even in this little zone, is so rich with possibility. Do I believe in the spirits? I was saying, if you run it back earlier this evening, I described my experience with a full floating apparition. I described my complete and utter belief in what I saw to be ghosts and spirits and replays and all sorts of things. Now, what are they exactly? I am still pondering. I'm still considering what I have on film and what I you know, and the bummer is I can't share the film because I don't work for the place anymore. It doesn't really belong to me. I have it. I can share it personally, but it's not something I put on YouTube, which is like, CNN has footage of it though. That's a whole other story. One of them is full floating apparition in the audience. The critic being bored, moving his hand around. I have a bunch of actually I have pictures somewhere. I'll break them out. I'll make sure I have them up. I think it's on the older computer. So I believe that there is a multidimensional value. There is untold amounts of, like a Googleplex worth of permutations happening in this tiny little balance and variance outside of the 93 to 94% of whatever is hypothetically dark matter and unseen. It reminds me of a background computer program in a video game, because I believe that that's similar to what we are, providing a better answer for something that resembles us in a massive frame elsewhere, which may be doing the same for another massive frame elsewhere, because it is easy to see how the replication of mirroring could happen, which is why I say always take a look at the demons in the darkness. Always take a look at the shadow people. Keep an eye out for them in those you seem to think are in the shine, because they might have crept in while they were playing hero. They might not actually be a hero at all anymore, because the darkness and the shadow has taken over while you were trusting them. And they don't have to tell you. There's no rules. Life is extraordinarily chaotic. The universe is extraordinarily chaotic. So don't expect someone to tell you that the shadow crept in. At the same time, the polarity of that situation, the opposite, is also true. Just because you are sure the darkness has taken over doesn't mean that somewhere there's not still light that can come shining through, so long as the lesson is given the grace to learn and the pressure is removed. The journey doesn't have to be alone in the darkness through the forest. You see, most of us are somewhere around a thing called the obelisk. We might not realize it, but we are. You see, there's a physical embodiment of this, an actual representation in stone, glass, steel, you name it, in the center of every major city in every major country around the planet. Do I believe in dreams? I absolutely do. Oh yeah, I have videos about how dreams are real. And that's not really a metaphor. It's there's lots of science to show that the same activities that go on in our brains during dreaming is the same activity that goes on in our waking state. So there's hardly any difference, except for the fact that your physical or physiological responses are turned off by your neurological systems, medulla specifically. And dream states and alternate states of consciousness have always fascinated me, and I've studied a lot of that stuff. I've done my own experiences. I would consider myself a pretty decent psychonaut, as far as like, as well as kind of a dream knot, though my lucid dreaming is something I'm not a fan of because it always turns into a zombie movie for some reason, or it turns into like something where I'm hunting for something serious and looking for the Ark of the Covenant. It tells you anything about me. In some strange hotel, and yes, there is a monkey with a little hat on. I don't know what that's about. Please, someone tell me. Anyways, do I believe in dreams? I do. So yeah, and it's more than that, though. See, we have scientifically based knowledge about the gateway process. It's from the military. I've shared the book. I'm about to read it, actually, in the coming weeks. I'm going to read it to you, so we can all learn the gateway process together from the Monroe Institute. With the missing 25th page, the report to the U.S. Army, including the missing 25th page. I'm going to do it again. I've done it before. And then I'm going to read the actual gateway process. And then I'm thinking about doing a whole entire episode about the Kozarov mirror, which once you interpolate this Kozarov mirror usage with the gateway process, you should be able to clearly go beyond remote viewing to time travel, alternate lines of reality, and beyond the veil, as well as other dimensions. Now, you may be looking at me and shaking your head and thinking, woohoo, woohoo! But I assure you, every piece of paper that I will read to you is a government document, and not about a hypothesis, but a report in its final state, as well as directions. Because, my friends, I want you to trust me with your entertainment values. And I also want you to know I don't fuck around with that bullshit. I go straight to the source. It's pretty easy. It's the goggle. The goggle is the goggle. The gaggle. Whatever, the G with the G and the L and the E. Yeah, I come out of deep, like, delta wave, knockout, actually tired. And the upper theta, when I'm in lucid dreaming, I can run a marathon and come out of it and just, like, still be knocked out, by the way. Yeah, it's tough. It can be a tough scenario, to be honest with you. I was about to say that he's just hanging out at the sign. He doesn't want to go any further. What does he see? Anyhow, there's an obelisk in every major city around the world. It's a symbol of power. It's a symbol of control. And it's also a symbol of an energy sourcing funnel. It's a metaphor for all of us, well, those of us who aren't free from the mental prisons that feed the need to tribalize and fight an other that is imagined. It is the embodiment of letting the shadows in and letting them run wild as your correctional officer in a penal colony that you decided to put yourself in. Well, my friends, all you'd be doing is funneling your energy up to the top of that funnel, the obelisk, and at the top of it is a thing called the Benben, a four-sided pyramid that represents power incarnate, and it is separate of the funnel. It sits on top, crushing and holding it in place, with its bottom face looking downward to make sure that remains the status quo. Well, it's up to us, you and I, every single one of us. No one is excluded, but it's one at a time, so it's really slow. And here's how it goes. Not a secret. It's pretty open. You just may not have known there's a name to this stuff. So there is, because definition matters. Look at the dictionary, please. Sorry, here's a close-up moment. Please. It's up to us, one at a time. Every single one of us who's awake and aware enough to look around and see others in that mental prison that they built for themselves, throwing their own fucking bullshit at others. The others they perceive as others, when they're brethren and sisters and cousins and loved ones and family. All of us as a tribe of humanity. There is no other, there's just us. On this little tiny speck in the darkest corner of one of the smallest and furthest galaxies. We are the tiny blue dot. Barely in a sunray. Barely in the Goldilocks zone. It takes a hand. That's all it takes. It's not magic. You pull someone up from their knees. You pat them on the back. You pull them out from a mental prison they built for themselves. And you remind them that there's other people there who care. You might even offer them the sledgehammer of mirth to smash down that stuff. Because it's on them. But it's also on us. Because if we don't do anything about it, we don't really observe it, and we're not honest about it, we might let a monster drive the wrong way on a highway because we just weren't paying attention and we really didn't care until after we had to be accountable for an atrocity. Well, my friends, we don't have to be. Unless, of course, that's the nightmare. And you need to wake up. You heard me. It's the nightmare. You need to wake up. Wake up! Look up! Thank you so much for being here. First of many spooky nights to come. Thank you, Lita. If you're still awake, probably not East Coast time. It's late. You got kids. Oh, wait, I was like, it's Saturday tomorrow. Screw that. Where are you, Lita? I hope you join us for further scary episodes or scurry, interesting, creepy, creep you out, Oktoberfest, spooky ass episodes. More stories about the unthinkable, more stories about ghouls and ghosts, each night with its own concept and theme. I thank you for being here, and I appreciate your time. I appreciate that your spirits are here, because it means, well, you live in the light. Don't let the darkness take you down. And most of all, look up. Click.